but it didn't give me an option. Hold on. It was supposed to give me an option to back it up, but it did not give me an option. So Joanne, can you initiate your audio recorder, please?
Yes, it's recording.
Okay. Can somebody give me a heads up? Did they also hear the message recording in progress?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So hopefully we won't have an issue. So Chair, we are ready for you to reconvene the meeting.
Great. Now I call to order the meeting of the Beaverton Budget Committee. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Duggar. Councillor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Here.
Hassan.
Present.
Kimmy. Teeter.
I'm here.
Tifnon.
Here.
Mayor Beatty.
Here.
Member Hanway.
Here.
Hong.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Maldonado. Payne.
Here.
Satsmiri.
Here.
Udata. Decker.
Here.
And Philip.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Before we start the public hearing, I'd like to modify the agenda just slightly. We'll open with some remarks from the city manager. And then after the stormwater fund, we'll have the finance director talk about the building fund. With that change, I will now open the public hearing on the proposed City of Beaverton fiscal year 2023-24 budget. For those of you who may not be able to stay for the rest of the meeting, we will start with an opportunity for members of the public to comment on the budget before the staff presentations later this evening on the Public Works and Fund and Capital Improvement Program. There will be an opportunity for public comment after the staff presentations as well. Before I ask for the first speaker, I want to address how to participate in this hearing. If you join the meeting by phone, you can enter *9 to let the city recorder know you wish to speak. Alternatively, if you join this meeting online, you can use the raised hand feature to show that you wish to speak. Now, each member of the public who speaks at tonight's hearing will have a maximum of 2 minutes. But before we start the public hearing, Jenny, do you want to give some opening comments?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. If we could have the slide deck up. What I do want to do for the committee this evening, just very briefly, is do a recap of where we were on May 9th, and then which will lead us into the rest of our budget presentation for tonight. So if we could move to the next slide. So as you recall, this budget addresses a $10 million shortfall in our general fund, and the city's structural imbalance was a combination of several factors, one being the lack of keeping alignment with available revenue and expenditures, and of course, adjustments that needed to be made for a growing community. And a lot of this began pre-pandemic, but once we got into this pandemic, we saw a lot of things happen that exacerbated our situation. The city chose to maintain service levels at a cost, while other cities were laying off and making adjustments to services. And then we were also really hit significantly hard by inflation to the tune of 8%, which really increased contractual cost of living wage adjustments and healthcare. We also had steep pension expenses as well. And just to leave you with the order of magnitude over the next past 2 years, our pension and cost of living impacts were at least $7 million alone. Next slide. So of course, what this required is we had to do a number of budget balancing recommendations that were in this budget for you. And I wanted to just kind of call out a few things for your memory. So this budget proposes to adjust property tax to the voter approved max rate of $4.62 per assessed thousand. And this would generate about $4.5 million. It also updates business license fees that haven't been adjusted since 2016. It includes a number of strategic one-time investments. Many of these are going to advance the council's fiscal sustainability goals, ranging from completing fee studies to strengthening our budget analytical capabilities to making significant infrastructure repairs in some of our facilities. And then, of course, under operating reductions, we have a number of significant changes that are happening in the budget, which I know is going to be a challenge for this group to grapple with. But many of those include things like impacts to nearly 18 positions, most vacant, but some are unfilled, in addition to changes and reductions in our temporary staffing. And then a couple of things I want to call out is the budget does propose to restructure our emergency management program. Ideally, we'd like to have this in the police department to better align and leverage resources. And so it does include in the elimination of one vacant position, which may subsequently be underfilled depending on what we do with the implementation. Reductions also include changing or discontinuing the police photo radar band services. And we're looking to implement a more effective and efficient enforcement action. And so we'll see that being pursued later on in this fiscal year and bring some information to council as we start shaping that new approach. And then, of course, various sponsorships and contributions are being adjusted. Some are being discontinued while others are being reduced. And I just want to clarify in making that statement, this is not social service funding. These are just smaller sized sponsorships and reductions. Next slide. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this should look familiar to you. This is our general fund forecast, and it shows that we've actually closed our 23-24 $10 million shortfall. And so while we've addressed the deficit with several recommended permanent changes, our expenses, which is shown on the gold line, continue to outpace our revenues, which is reflected in the green line far into the horizon. And I can't emphasize enough that this is going to require, thank you, go back. This is going to require us to identify a number of structural changes over the next 5 years. So we are going to be at this for some time. And if no changes occur, if you look out on 2028, that could get as large as a $9 million gap. So we need to keep our eye on making these adjustments and making sure that they're permanent in nature. The other thing I want to draw your attention to in this slide is that our reserves are also going to be impacted without making permanent structural changes. You'll see that that solid black line starts to take a nosedive, and it'll fall below what's called our target line, which is that purple dotted line. And that's about 11% of expenditures we'd like to have in our reserves so that we can pivot and adjust when we have issues like this. Right now, it's probably not as solid as we need it to be because we've got such a large shortfall that we need to close. Next slide. And then I'll leave you with the other shortfall scenario that we have going on, which is the 1 million library fund shortfall. This trend shows the history of the library forecast. You haven't seen this chart, and I put it in here because I wanted you to see that we've been having challenges that go back and back to 2018, and you can see those lines are one on top of another. The blue lines, the revenue line, and the green lines, expenditures. And as we get further out, you can see those lines start to get further and further apart, and that's that deficit that's starting to grow. And we've got similar issues if you look at the lines below in our fund balance, and that's the library. The library has its own reserves, and that's the black line there. And they typically will have been below that target line. Again, that purple line is where we want to be. And as you can see, that becomes worse over time. So we do have a lot of work that we need to do with our library fund, which of course has multiple external funding sources and also relies on some funding from the city general fund as well. And so while we were able to maintain the past operations of the library, this current year as an example, That's really because we had the flexibility of not filling positions to get us kind of over the goal line. But we don't have that luxury this next fiscal year. And so that's why we've got some really hard decisions that we're going to have to make and what I'm recommending to you in this budget. The budget does propose to reduce the Murray Shoals branch from 7 days to 4 days a week, but we continue to maintain story times 4 to 5 times during that week, and our after school program at least 1 time during the week. But to balance this, we're going to make sure that we're strategically using our bookmobile, which is funded through grants right now. And then we're continuing to maintain all of our services that are at our the main library. And that includes programming as well. Next slide. And just wrapping things up, I won't read through these for you. I know that these are online if you'd like to look at them, but this is the budget framework for the general fund. It just reminds you, including the library as well, just reminds you some of the key things that are in this proposed budget so that you have these kind of at the forefront as you begin to deliberate over the budget later on in our conversation this evening. We can move to the next slide. We'll just wrap up those points and showing you. So these are my concluding remarks. I just wanted to set the table to remind everybody where we were the last time we talked, which was about 2 weeks. And now we're going to move into the second portion of this evening's discussion. So I will turn it right back over to staff or the chair to direct us.
I just also want to make a note for the record that Edward Kimmy has shown up, is here now.
Okay, well, thank you, Jenny. Now for the public hearing, and you'll have a chance again after the presentations. Again, *9 or raise your hand if you're online in no more than 2 minutes. Is there anyone who has any comment from the public?
Yes, Chair, we have a handful of people that would like to make public comment. And I do notice that a former council member has joined us as a panelist, which she should have remained an attendee, but she had her hand up first. But I want to set the clock first. And so Kate Arnold, you'll be first on deck and we'll have 2 minutes. And let me go ahead and just set the clock and share my screen. And then I will call the names from the attendees and give each of them a chance to speak.
Great.
So hold on for just a sec here. Are you seeing a clock?
We're seeing a clock.
Okay, very good. So if Kate Arnold is ready, go right ahead.
Kate?
I'm Kate Arnold. After 16 years on City Council, I am now a full-time volunteer. I serve in a dozen different organizations, including our Beaverton CERT and BERT teams. I really love the altruism and the energy of those groups. And I use something I call effective team practices that I shared when I was leaving. The principles are trust, listen, and share. And we have guardrails, including time. How are we spending our time together? Are we being effective? I hope you read the letter that I sent in. I spent over 8 hours of time writing it, partly because after 4 hours, I accidentally deleted it. Called my son, who's a programmer, who told me to use ChatGPT, which made me nervous with the whole AI taking over humanity. But I tried it, failed, and spent another 3 hours rewriting it. I won't go through it all, but I hope you see the main point that I think needs to be made. And that is we've got the volunteer groups that help with events, help with emergencies, and there's more stuff coming. If you cut from 3 operational people down to 1, and bringing someone in from police, they would have to have that kind of FEMA training, which I don't think they do right now. So I'm concerned about the hemorrhaging of our BERT and CERT programs, of us not being able to be full breath when something really comes up and we need 24-hour coverage. So please stop the bleed. Keep at least 2 emergency operation management personnel going. One just is not going to cut it. And I hope you understand that and we'll do that. And we need more discussion about how that would fit in with police to make sure. My understanding is they don't do FEMA stuff. It's a little bit different. So some of that would have to be looked at as well. Thank you for your work for our city. And I know you've got a lot of hard decisions to make, but I hope it becomes clear how important these services are to our city and our community.
Well, thank you, Kate. Perfect timing. If there are no questions, the next speaker.
Okay, hold on a sec. Please. Somehow I lost my Zoom settings. Is the screen still being shared?
Yeah, we still see the,
And we can see your email as well, Susan.
Okay. Operator error. Hold on just a sec. I know we had other people here, so just a minute, please. All right, here we go. David Bennett. I'm
okay,
going to allow you to talk, David Bennett, or ask to unmute. So once you unmute yourself, and I share my screen once more. All right, are you seeing the clock?
No,
Not yet.
Okay, how about now?
now I see it.
there it goes.
Okay, David Bennett.
Good evening. My name is David Bennett. I'm in my 16th year volunteering with the Beaverton Emergency Management Program, and I have a good understanding of their assignment. EM is all about public safety. It is critical to have established relationships with coordinated plans and trust with city departments and outside agencies. It's about planning and responding to unplanned but not unexpected events that threaten lives and property. It's about educating citizens so that they can better prepare for the unexpected, to better weather the storm, to respond safely, to protect themselves, their families, their neighborhood. Cutting emergency management and the associated programs in half does not come close to meeting the budget goal. It says maintains public safety and response levels, or the council goal of safety and community wellness. I challenge almost everything in the city's answer to the budget committee Q&A regarding the cut of 2 EM positions. Regarding the interim coordinator, yes, it's an interim position. It was also well established before the COVID pandemic, and she was fully engaged with further planning and coordination assignments. She was reassigned to coordinate the multi-agency response to the crisis, but the work she set aside is still there to do. Her leaving means more work to be shared with the manager and the officer. Program sizing, accepting a financial consultant sizing recommendation without further research has no credibility. Citing the number of emergency management staff in other cities without further investigating how they perform against federal and state requirements or how they engage their citizenry for mitigation and preparedness is highly short-sighted. Cutting the staff in half and restructuring without considering the ramifications to the city, key outside agencies, and to the citizens of Beaverton is reckless and irresponsible. I urge you to fund the emergency management officer position and also commission outside subject matter expertise to determine the appropriate program, emergency management program functions and sizing. And that should have been my 2 minutes, so I'll thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Do you have any questions of David? Not, is there another speaker, Susan?
Yes, we have the next speaker will be Ryan Hendricks.
Okay, as soon as there we go. We've got the,
Are you ready, Ryan?
This is David Bennett. You just asked me to unmute. I think you got the.
Oops. Okay, there we go. Ryan Hendricks.
Thank you. Mayor, city councilors, and the budget committee members, I'm Commissioner Ryan Hendricks, co-chair of the Beaverton Arts Commission. Personally, I want to thank the mayor and the city council for being such a strong supporter of the arts. Historically, our strong partnership, we were able to sustain art organizations through the challenging COVID years. Rather than diverting significant funds away from the arts, the city was able to provide much needed support via COVID art assistant grants. These grants funds were lifelines to so many longstanding art groups through the city of Beaverton. The effects of these grants continue today. Thank you for your support and vision to keep art alive and ensure that art not only lives here in Beaverton, but thrives. Unfortunately, it's come to our attention that grant funding throughout the city's budget has taken a significant hit in the proposed budget. I can't speak for other groups, but the arts program is slated to take a 25% reduction in grants funding. In isolation, this is an extremely minor amount of $20,000 in the shadow of the overall budget, but a major impact to the Beaverton arts community. Its effect would be broadly felt, which is why I'm present today, raising awareness to this program and offer my support to other grants programs within the city. We recognize that government arts programs cannot do everything the community wants or needs. However, these art grants are like incubators for cultural arts in our city. They give voice to those who might not otherwise have it. Mayor, you once stated, partnering with nonprofits expand our mission beyond what government can do. Granted, this statement wasn't referring to arts nonprofits, but the theory is still true. These grants are a great investment in our culture, diversity, and community building. And the return is exponential. Many times it's even more efficient. Please don't discount the impacts of grants have on the betterment of our community. Its impacts on budget in some cases, like art grants, is so minor compared to the massive impact it has on the community. I appreciate the great stewardship this community has taken with our city's budget, and thank you for the continued support.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, can you let me know, are you seeing the clock?
Yes.
Okay, good, okay. So next up, we have Brian Hall.
That's Bill Hall.
Bill Hall, sorry, Bill Hall. Are you ready, Bill? Go
Yes,
ahead.
I am. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Bill Hall. I have been a member of the Beaverton
Bill.
Community Emergency Response Team since 2018, and I'm a co-founder of Cedar Hills Ready, a volunteer organization that works at the neighborhood level to help neighborhoods become prepared for disaster events. And the seeds of our educational program and community training are found in Beaverton CERT. And as a CERT, I've been trained in search and triage, emergency communications, and many other skills. Cedar Hills Ready, which is just one of many organic groups helping our communities, mustered more than $35,000 in free volunteer time working with the Beaverton metro communities at the neighborhood level in 2022 alone. And this is just a small part of community efforts that BCERT helps to generate, providing the city with thousands of dollars of free program assistance leveraged by the city through its CERT program. The budget proposal that you're reviewing tonight suggests eliminating half of the emergency management team that provides vital support to BCERT's efforts to provide the city and the metro area with at least a 3-to-1 return on its current investments. The effect of such cuts will be to eliminate the ability of the emergency management department to coordinate and resource CERT. And this in turn would cripple CERT's ability to garner the help of the community in preparedness activity. This is really a bad idea financially all by itself. And FEMA's analysis of state disaster shows Oregon among the top 5 states for an increasing number of natural disasters in climate change. Oregon has seen at least 37 major disasters in the state in the last 5 years: fires, heat domes, etc. In this environment, why in the world would our city want to cut emergency staff by half and the emergency management budget by 40%? It's crazy. Please look at the data and recommend against those cuts for the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, next up, we have Sarah V.
Hello. I'm ready. My name is Sarah Vandehei, and I'm here as a proud member of SEIU 503, Sublocal 198. I'm here to urge you to consider amending the current proposed budget at the city. I recognize that the city is facing incredibly hard decisions due to the budget shortfall. However, balancing the budget on the back of the frontline staff who serve our community simply is not the answer. Represented staff throughout the city are already stretched thin and struggling to keep pace with the growing needs of our residents. We firmly believe that while sacrifices must be made, the city is unfairly placing the burden of these sacrifices in the wrong places. Did you know that the staff to management ratio at the city of Beaverton was recently calculated at 1 manager to every 2.38 staff? This, while a healthy organization, keeps that ratio at roughly 1 manager to every 5 to 10 staff. Yet these layoffs are cutting 8 staff members with the library and only 2 managers from our ranks. The rest of these cuts are already vacated positions. This means that the balance of management to staff continues to trend in the wrong direction. Further, senior management recently asked for proposed 3%, 5%, and 10% budget cut proposals from mid-level management across the city. These proposals were often ignored or offered further cuts to some of the valuable community resources that our residents have come to rely on. As a staff, we recognize that the budget crisis is real. We are ready and prepared to see targeted cuts to some of our programming. However, losing represented staff cannot and should not be considered a viable option. Please amend the current proposed budget to protect our frontline staff and the value they bring to make our community thrive.
Thank you, Sarah. Perfect timing.
Yeah. Next up, we have Adam. Adam Korst.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and Budget Committee. My name is Adam Korst, and I am the president of SEIU 503 Sublocal 198 here in Beaverton.
Adam, we can't hear you.
Oh, I can hear him.
Can you pause me? Am I heard?
I hear you fine.
So I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Adam Korst. I'm the president of SEIU 503 Sublocal 198 here in Beaverton. About 2 weeks ago, I had the duty of sitting in with 8 library staff members as the city informed them that their services would no longer be necessary with the passing of this new budget. I watched the flood of emotions from these people who have cumulatively given over 35 years of service to our city. I watched as these staff members often had more questions than city management had answers. It felt like a conveyor belt of a process, each person being limited to roughly 20 minutes with no extra time for questions or processing as the next library worker to lose their job waited in the room over. Tonight, I ask that you undo what has been done. I ask that you explore and find other options to fully fund these positions. We tout ourselves as a city that provides the highest quality of services to our community. We brag about our libraries boasting the highest circulation numbers in the state. We continue to focus on growing our great city. So much of that growth is focused in areas close to our Murray Shoals branch. Yet, as we continue to grow our community, city leaders decide to reduce city resources in this rapidly developing area. In a recent conversation with union leadership, management confessed to not knowing if the reduction in hours at Murray Shoals branch would have any impact on the WCCLS contributions to the city for library operations. We know that WCCLS currently contributes $6,556,470 now, but what happens to the services our library provides should that number drop due to a loss in funding? How deep will these cuts need to continue to go? Our library staff deserves better. Our community certainly deserves better. And I am confident that this committee, along with council, can find a way to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for those comments.
Next up, we have Bill Blair.
Good evening. I'm Bill Blair, and I'm a volunteer with Beaverton CERT. And this evening, I want to share a true story with you because I know it's true. I was there. Happened last August. Pardon, it happened last August. A pregnant 17-year-old autistic girl and a number of her friends took advantage of a cooling shelter that CERT set up in a library. They were there for several days in a row, and on the last day that any of us saw this young mother-to-be, we noticed that she seemed disoriented. Her skin was hot, dry, was red. She said she wanted to throw up. She bundled herself up in a blanket and went outside despite the heat. We knew that something was very wrong with this young woman, and that something was heat stroke. It's a life-threatening condition. We gave first aid, called 911, kept her friends calm, and TVF and R transported her to St. V's emergency room, where she survived the experience. The point here is that in any emergency, those in our community who are already underserved will most likely be the first to be affected by that emergency. And they come in all shapes and sizes, these emergencies. In this case, it was a heat dome, but whatever the community emergency management is an essential and critical function of city government. It doesn't really belong with the police. It is a separate and integral part of how the community survives. In the next year or two, when more disasters strike our community, I wonder, will folks then look back on this 23-24 budget and ask, what in the world were they thinking? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Next up, we have Claudia Steiner Fricker. So Claudia, if you would like to speak, you can unmute yourself. Okay. There.
Okay, I got it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
1 second. I got out of some stuff here. All right, thank you and good evening. My name is Claudia Steiner Fricker. I'm a 9-year emergency management volunteer with CERT and the volunteer supervisor of emergency management's disaster preparedness outreach and public education program. For over 10 years, the outreach team has worked tirelessly to prepare Beaverton households and neighborhoods to build a resilient post-disaster community. We will launch the B2 Weeks Ready program from Oregon Emergency Management this year. Based on data that Oregon is facing more frequent and severe hazards, this program is the result of a directive from the governor and data from the Oregon Resilience Plan, a 50-year plan to mitigate damage to critical infrastructure and loss of life. B2 Weeks prepares Oregonians to have enough supplies to be self-sufficient for a minimum of 2 weeks following a major emergency or disaster. We have already implemented a liaison program between the NACs and emergency management. This will ensure that our planning is directed towards each NAC to meet their needs. We work with neighborhoods, organizations, including faith-based affinity groups, community leaders, and stakeholders to reach all members of the community. Outreach, CERT, and the Beaverton Emergency Radio Team work directly with emergency management in the 4 phases of emergency management, which are mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Lastly, I would like to call your attention to the fact that the city's Q&A answer that emergency management can function solely with the emergency manager and 1 support staff like other cities around the size of Beaverton is misleading and devoid of context. Instead, the research on these programs supports having our EM positions fully staffed. The reference programs are struggling to meet state mandated EM requirements. They do not have volunteer programs of our size, and most do not participate in regional or countywide disaster planning to the level Beaverton does. Public safety and public trust are the EM slogan. What, however, has no relationship to the police department is its mission as directed by FEMA, which protects communities by coordinating and integrating all activities necessary to build, sustain, and improve the capability to mitigate against,
prepare for, respond to, and recover from threatened or actual natural disasters, acts of terrorism.
Claudia, I think we're just about out of time here.
Okay, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Claudia.
Okay, next up, we have Hannah McAllister.
Thank you, Susan. I'm ready whenever you are.
Oops. Okay,
Good
go
evening,
ahead.
budget. Okay. Good evening, budget committee members and city councilors. My name is Hannah McAllister, and I am the treasurer for SEIU 503, sublocal 198. The proposed layoffs and reduction of hours at the Murray Shoals Library would negatively impact the community by reducing access and services while putting future library funding from WCCLS at risk. The Murray Shoals location has an emphasis on youth collections and programming that directly benefit the growing neighborhoods in that area. In April, Little Scientist Storytime had an average of 37 participants, while the toddler playgroup had 44. The programming cuts associated with the proposed reduction in library staff would include eliminating both Little Scientist Storytime and toddler playgroup, as well as the LGBTQ Teen Book Club and all adult programs at Murray Shoals. On the 3 days that the branch library will be closed, area residents that rely on public transit would need to use at least 2 bus lines to access the main library. This proposed budget will eliminate early childhood programming and create more barriers for community members to access the ones that remain. Beaverton has one of the busiest library systems in the state of Oregon and receives a majority of its funding from WCCLS. The formula that WCCLS uses to determine how money gets distributed includes circulation, open hours, and other service-related measures. How does the proposed budget that is cutting programming, hours, and staff not put our continued funding at risk? When asked if this would impact our future WCCLS contributions, city management said that they did not know. This is too important of a decision to base on an unknown. We ask that you all strongly consider amending the proposed budget so that it truly reflects the values and priorities of Beaverton. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hannah.
Okay, next up, we have Tony Fuller.
Good evening. My name is Tony Fuller, 49-year resident of Beaverton, CERT member and currently logistics lead. My wife and I went through the basic training over the course of several weeks, and then our final consisted of us working together with other members to demonstrate proficiency in many areas, including disaster prep and planning, using the incident command system, effective communication, first aid, triage, light search and rescue, fire suppression, and even disaster psychology. Once certified, we were able to sign up and volunteer for events. We did night markets, flicks by the fountain, a lot of vaccine pods, cooling centers, and more. Having the emergency management group coordinate the volunteers made the process easy to access. The events were well organized and professional, and as a result, we were able to work with other agencies. I'm sure it was efficient for the city staff also to be able to call the emergency manager and access this help in a moment's notice. If you're looking for a return on investment, this is a solid bet. FEMA studies show up to 6 times return on investment due to effective planning and quick deployment of resources. Imagine being able to drop hundreds of trained volunteers throughout the city quickly, if needed, to multiply the efforts of professional responders. You have that. You have an emergency management team that can and has experience deploying them. Cutting that team in half would compromise public safety and resilience and the city's ability to handle the more frequent emergency needs. I can't see a shared or restructured approach being as effective or as accountable. You've got highly trained volunteers, you've got an experienced emergency management team, and you could have a great return on investing in them. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tony.
Next up, we have Stan Hausman.
Thank you. My name is Stan Hausman. I volunteer in several organizations and am a longtime Beaverton CERT member in the Red Team. Amateur radio operator, Quake Up founder, Garden Home, Raleigh Hills and West Slope CPO3, as well as the CCI, the founder and administrator of Next Door Garden Home, and a few other things. I've been CERT trained since 1998, just after the Northridge earthquake in Southern California. In 2013, a neighbor who is a TVFNR firefighter made a suggestion that Susan, my wife, and I become part of Beaverton CERT with the training, practice, and drills. Why CERT? In the case of a disaster, the usual first responders are just as affected as everyone else. Having the benefit of being CERT trained, we were able to aid our neighbors as first responders until outside help arrives. As a volunteer of the Citizen Participation Organization and the Committee for Community Involvement, I've talked about Beaverton's CERT program, providing information regarding disaster preparation. OSU staff who oversaw these programs, knowing this, put me in contact with another member, and we started Quake Up. The basis of the Quake Up program is built from the CERT program for individuals and families to be prepared, and also for neighbors, helping neighbors to rely on each other. Quake Up events have taken place in numerous cities, including Beaverton. There have been a number of other groups that have put on similar programs, including Beaverton's Emergency Management Department, Beaverton's NACS, etc. The training and practices that Beaverton CERT has provided are a direct result of how important the coordination, assistance, support, and supplies provided by the Beaverton Emergency Management Department. I invite you to learn more about this FEMA program and its many benefits to the city of Beaverton. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dan.
Next up, we have Josh Laurie.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors, and Budget Committee. My name is Josh Laurie, and I'm the Director of Student Success Programs here at Portland Community College. For the last 11 years, I've managed, supervised, and had the pleasure of working in Future Connect program as its founding manager. Future Connect is a scholarship and support program for first-generation, low-income students coming directly from high school to PCC. This program has grown to serve about 850 students each year now within Multnomah County and Washington County. Since 2013, Future Connect has enrolled 1,086 students in Washington County, and 526 of those students are Beaverton residents. However, nearly 3 times that amount apply to the program. Our agreement with the city of Beaverton and your support has allowed us to work alongside every student who applies to Future Connect, meaning we have served nearly 1,600 Beaverton low-income graduates over the last 9 years with pre-college support and coaching. Here are some quick demographics about your students. 82% of our Beaverton students are low income. 77% of our students in the program identify as non-white, and 51% of the students identify as Latinx. One key data point that should be highlighted: enrollment in our Beaverton cohort in the program has not dropped 1% in the last 4 years, all while national trends at community college enrollment have declined by a staggering 21%. This is what we do in Future Connect. We identify a need in education and support vulnerable populations so they can access equitable education at key moments in their lives. We've been devastated to learn that the city of Beaverton has slated to eliminate this funding for these populations of students. We understand the immense challenges you face as city council and city managers and the mayor of Beaverton. We urge you to reconsider this decision to eliminate this program entirely, but rather work through partnership and dialogue to consider how we can continue to serve those most vulnerable populations in our communities while still making fiscal responsible budget decisions. In the end, we thank you for the years of support you've provided to students, and our partnership will stand strong if we have a chance to continue to work together, even in these tight times. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, next up, we have Karen Ronning Hall.
So Karen, if you,
There we go.
there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Karen Ronning Hall, and I have been a member of Beaverton's Community Emergency Response Team since 2018 and a member of the Beaverton Emergency Radio Team. I also co-founded a neighborhood ready preparedness group called Cedar Hills Ready. Budgets are all about priorities and investment. The proposal to cut Beaverton's emergency management by 50% in staffing from 4 to 2 employees is foolish. It leaves our community exposed and vulnerable. EM staff currently coordinates the efforts of hundreds of volunteers to reduce the impact of emergencies and disasters, as well as builds relationships with other first responder organizations. It's a big and essential job, especially as the risk of disasters is increasing. Did you know that according to FEMA data, over the last 5 years, 37 disasters have been declared in Oregon? Compare that to the first 5 years of the 1970s with 8 disaster declarations in Oregon. These 37 disasters, mostly firestorms and dangerous weather events, and experts predict this upward trend will continue. In addition, Oregon Emergency Management says that there is a 37% chance of a massive Cascadia earthquake occurring during many of our lifetimes. And the former FEMA Kenneth Murphy director said that this quake, when it happens, our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast. Think about what has happened to our communities that have ignored these risks. The OSU scientists are predicting that, many thousands of lives will be lost, and and property damages billions, and leaving thousands of people homeless. The Emergency Management Department reduces these potential risks and losses by training the public to become prepared. So eliminating these positions will reduce the support for EM volunteers and their programs such as CERT, ham radio, and Neighborhood Ready. Given the public safety is the #1 priority of the city, I implore you to maintain the current EM staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay, next up we have Cameron Soto.
Hi there, checking. Well, thank you for your time, everyone. My name is Cameron Soto. I graduated from Beaverton High School in 2013, and I would just like to take everyone back there for just a second. I was a homeless student at the time, not really thinking I was going to graduate. I had a GPA of, I think I graduated with 1.5, and I say that with a lot of gratitude because I actually did graduate. That was not my sights. I had a wonderful counselor, Karen Stabino at Beaverton High School. That actually introduced me into Future Connect. I did not ever, let me just, again, go back to the beginning. I didn't think I was going to graduate, let alone think I'd ever be able to afford / go to college in the first place. I was held out of school. My mom, at the time I grew up in kind of a challenged neighborhood, was pulled out of school. And I have to just share my sheer gratitude for Future Connect. I am the person today because I did go to college. I ended up traveling the world, living in China for 5 years, India for almost a year because of Future Connect and the gap year program that I was allowed to join because I went to PCC, then transferred to PSU. Currently living in the Dalles. That was my wife's decision. I would be very happy in Beaverton. So hopefully I will see you all one day soon. But I wanted to really express the investment in education, specifically Future Connect. My story is anecdotal. I am one student, but the community that I got with Future Connect and the lifelong friends I have because of Future Connect and because of that investment that the Beaverton budget community made in 2013, I will forever be grateful for. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Cameron.
Okay, next up we have Mackenzie.
Hi there, I'm ready when you are.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Mackenzie Ross, and I'm speaking today as the Union Secretary for SEIU 503, Sublocal 198. I'm also the branch librarian at Murray Shoals, and 2 weeks ago, I received my unofficial layoff notice per the proposed city budget. Back in September 2016, I was hired as the Youth Services Librarian for the Murray Shoals branch, and it was like a dream come true. I'd already been working with youth in libraries for 6 years, and as someone who grew up in outer Northeast Portland, this was as close to coming home as I'd probably get. For the past 6.5 years, this community has truly become my home. I lived in the South Beaverton community for the vast majority of this time, and it's been some of the happiest years of my life. It sounds corny, but it is absolutely true. I'm so lucky to have amazing coworkers at Murray Shoals. I've made close friends in the area, and if you're in the area, you've probably seen me out running. And I've absolutely loved getting to know and form wonderful connections with our fantastic patrons and community members. I've been recognized in the Whole Foods parking lot, at Al's Garden and Home, and on the street. I love my job and feel so lucky that this is the case. I get to recommend great books to kids and teens, lead well-loved story times for babies and toddlers, and engage in craft and STEM activities for K-5 kids. These are all highlights of my days and weeks at work. Shortly after I received my unofficial layoff notice, I texted some friends saying, "What if I never get to do story time again?" At the end of the day, I'll be fine, but I mourn what this community will lose. Friendly faces, having open hours reduced to just 4 days a week, Little Scientist Storytime, Toddler Playgroup, and more. Furthermore, I had the pleasure and honor to see how our library branch is a refuge for so many families and community members, and it breaks my heart to know that for some folks, visiting another library simply won't be an option. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
Next up, we have Suzanne Hesse.
Good evening, Mayor, Budget Committee members, and City Councilors. My name is Suzanne Hesse, and I'm the interim manager of the Future Connect program at Portland Community College. Previously to taking on the manager role, I was a coach at the Southeast campus for 6 years. We have greatly appreciated the support the City of Beaverton has provided in the past to fund our scholarships and support program for hundreds of Beaverton students. Scholarships are extremely important, especially for many students we serve who are undocumented and thus have minimal access to financial aid. Those scholarships can mean the difference between starting and not starting their college career, and it can even mean not completing when only a few credits shy due to lack of funding. As a coach and now as manager, I've clearly seen the impact that the coaching relationship has on student success. The majority of our students are first generation, meaning they are the first person in their extended family to attend college, and many are the first to complete high school. These students come to college ready to face the challenges of their academic and career choices, but the bigger hurdle is often the systems in place from financial aid to the admissions and enrollment process that requires students to navigate complex and often confusing pathways to get to their first day of school. The coach and the support provided by the Future Connect program makes that difference. Students have their one person, their one-stop PCC shop who builds a relationship with them so that when they have questions, face challenges, or are afraid, they have someone they know will be there for them no matter what. When students need to choose classes, make sure they are on track to graduate, face homelessness, need support with parenting resources, or just to find food so that they can focus on school, their coach is the person they often turn to for all of those things. In one Beaverton student's words, my favorite Future Connect moment was the first month of PCC when I had a Future Connect class and spent the class talking to my Future Connect coach about my goals and ambitions just one day. That one class helped me set a goal for this version of me to strive for, and for that, I am thankful for Future Connect. This student was recently awarded our Future Connect Next Steps full ride scholarship to attend Linfield and will be attending in the fall to study microbiology and join the medical field. The support the City of Beaverton has provided for Future Connect over the Future Connect tenure has been instrumental in changing the lives of so many students, their families, and their communities through the scholarships and the support that covers our coaching resources. We ask you to continue the funding commitment to Future Connect, especially to the students who applied for our program this fall, 2023-24, who are excited and getting ready to start their academic and career journeys. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Next up, we have Richard Creamy. Oops, I think he just dropped off. Next up, we have Kathy French.
Thank you. It's good to see all of you here tonight, and I really appreciate this space to share with you. My concern is about the library also. I know that one of your goals is the healthy community and supporting it. And a library is one way to support this healthy community. And especially when Cooper Mountain is near that library and the population is growing so much. Now is not the time to cut back. I'm going to talk about children just a little bit, but then talk about adults and the library. And children often are in terrible situations at home. The library is a place where they can go and feel safe, and with the books be in another world. So for adults, the adults in the libraries use computers to look for jobs, finish school assignments, look for schools, talk to government agencies. And those are important, but our libraries also have small classes for people, whether it be aging or talking in other languages, learning how to use those computers. That is really important. And think of the single parents who use the library. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, next up, we have Richard Crimmy.
Yeah, sorry, there was some glitch there. Richard Creamy, resident of Beaverton. I've been a volunteer with Beaverton CERT since 2007. In that time, I've attended multiple training events and spent hundreds of hours practicing my skills during many community events. We were deployed and very effective during the cross-agency vaccine clinics for the COVID-19 pandemic emergency. We've done a lot of good for the community, assisted our first responders, and helped to keep people safe. Perhaps, thankfully, I've not had to participate in an emergency for a school reunification yet. All of this has come about for me and 500 plus volunteers because of the work and dedication of a 4-person emergency management office. It's now proposed to cut staffing in half, funding by 40%, and restructure the program in some yet undefined way. I think that is false hope. I think it is a mistake. Imagine for a moment you need to see a dentist. I know, not exactly a pleasant thought, but neither is a real emergency. When you get there, you find out the small office is downsized. There's no one whose expertise in coordinating your insurance or ordering supplies or assisting the dentist. How well would that work for your mouth? I think in a similar way that this proposed budget could hamper the effectiveness of the emergency management office. There'll be less people and time to coordinate with outside agencies and with the volunteer pool, or time to obtain grants to help the program operate, as well as losing a seasoned and trained second in command to step in when needed. Something else that just caught my attention in the Q&A for this week is a statement that Washington County has an EMO. To be clear, their focus is on the county and not this or any city. Their efforts are not duplicative. I know there are tough decisions you're making. Please make one of them an amendment to restore staffing and keep the EMO in Beaverton one of the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, next up, we have Megan Bischoff.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and committee members. I have been a Beaverton CERT volunteer since fall of 2019. Last year, I became the co-leader of the Blue Geo team, which covers the southwest part of the city. I am here to voice my concern about the proposed cuts to the emergency management budget. Tonight, in particular, I want to talk about one of the many important programs that I've been trained to do as a Beaverton CERT member. That is to help with the reunification of families with their children in case of an incident, such as a school shooting that requires students to be evacuated from their school. We all sincerely hope that this never happens, but we need to be prepared for it. On short notice, the CERT reunification team will be asked to go to the reunification site and be there to help law enforcement and school officials reunite parents with their children in an orderly and controlled manner. The emergency manager will be the one to alert CERT leadership to call out the reunification team. The emergency manager will be on site to help manage a situation that is likely to be difficult for students and the parents. The emergency manager needs at least one other trained emergency management officer to be available for this and all other important roles that they will perform. The support of Beaverton CERT for this program is unique in the state of Oregon and will likely not be possible if the emergency management staff is cut by 50%. Please reconsider this plan. Thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you, Megan. Do we have anyone else, Susan?
Sorry about that. Yes, Lyndon Moore.
Present. Great. Am I audible?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Lyndon Moore, and I've been with Beaverton CERT for about 12 years. I'm currently in the volunteer leadership. Tonight, I wanted to bring up my chief concern about the budget cuts for EM around the EM officer. By cutting the EM officer role, we are reducing our operational effectiveness. The EM officer is a qualified second in command, much like Mr. Riker to Captain Picard. So with only one qualified EM manager on staff and not having a second in command, we're at a serious disadvantage for our response times within our service boundaries. So if more than one event happened simultaneously, like it has in the past, we would be kind of in a pickle. So emergencies don't come in ones, they come in twos and threes. So emergency management does more than just write grants. And our EM officer has an operational role to keep up with our public safety partners. Interagency relationships require feeding and care too. Plans communicated, MOUs coordinated, and trainings held on a regular basis. We can get by with less stuff, but not less people. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Lyndon.
Okay, next up we have Gloria Lee.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and committee. I'm a member of Cedar Hills Ready that works with disaster preparation. I want to echo what everyone else has so eloquently said in the beginning, that my concern is that we're cutting a budget item that right now remains undefined as to what the restructure is, and that in an event of an emergency, our resources will be cut by 50% or more, and actually more, because Cedar Hills Ready has been operating for 3 years, and we have just gotten to the point where we have expanded our volunteer capabilities, and we need the CERT and the BERT and Beaverton to be our resource so that we can expand emergency preparation and disaster preparation to all the citizens in Beaverton. Technically, I have worked in the county of Multnomah in nonprofit services as an executive director for 30 years. And although I live in the Beaverton and Washington County, I haven't been as active as I would have liked to have been. And I live here because of the services that are available. I hate to see this going away. And I'm going to say 49 seconds and end this and say, please reconsider how you want to appropriate these dollars and perhaps just cut one position, as I know how difficult budget cuts are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria.
Next up, we have Ann Wong. And I think there was a technical issue, so we'll go ahead and go to Bonnie Heaton.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can, okay, I couldn't see the 2 minutes. Hi, I am Bonnie Heaton, a counselor at Beaverton High School, and I've been their scholarship coordinator for the last 20 years. I'm also speaking to you as someone who was a first-generation college student myself.
Can't hear anything on my end.
I can hear.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear. So Bonnie, I paused you, so sorry about that. So Dave, can you hear us?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay, so I'm also speaking to you as someone who was a first-generation college student myself. My mom moved here from Mexico. She married my white dad, but neither of them attended college. I went to community college first and would have benefited greatly from a program like the Future Connect Scholarship Program. I fumbled around a lot, but figured it out, obviously. I felt such pride when our community developed a scholarship program to help first-generation low-income students, even and especially those who are undocumented and who don't often have many financial options for post-high school education. Cutting this program will cut hope for a lot of our kids. While we can still help kids access community college via the Oregon Promise, the help offered via a Future Connect College coach ensures the kids will go to college, that they will stay in college, and they will realize whatever their next step dreams are, whether it be going on to four-year school or not. We need an educated society, be it kids who are training to be nurses, school counselors, plumbers, or tattoo artists. Being someone who's employed helps people feel value, and community members who feel valued are less likely to wreak havoc in those communities. So please reconsider cutting scholarships for our deserving students. Also, just quickly, Cameron Soto, if you're still here, Karen Stabeno's birthday is today, and I'm going to let her know you gave her a little shout out. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Okay, so Ann Wong is back with us. So go ahead, Ann.
Thank you. And you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Ann Wong. I am part of CERT since 2016. I've been taught some skills by great leaders to cut out some of the departments that have made ELC radio, CERT, BERT, and other areas for volunteers to learn. It won't help our communities that much more. Please reconsider what you have on your chopping block, and please focus more on the communities and you, the panel, that will need our help the most, because without some areas that volunteers have been training for, it's so much more needed so that we can better understand how to help our communities out. And not only that, but it also allows other communities to understand what we're all about, so that we can all work together. And that's the biggest goal and idea that we, really do welcome at any time. And yeah, I really look forward to all that. And I love what I do, and I know other volunteers love what they do. And so I'm hoping that the programs that I have mentioned will not be on the chopping block, because we really do need them the most. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ann.
Next up, we have Esmeralda VS Future Connect.
Hello, I just wanted to say good evening, and I am a current student at PCC. I graduated Southridge High School year 2022, and I just wanted to mention that I am part of the Future Connect program, a scholarship and support program for students who identify as first generation or low income. In this program, they focus on eliminating barriers to college and provide students with ongoing support through scholarship money, career guidance, and personalized advising. First generation students face financial constraints that may affect their ability to persist in college compared to other peers. Some demographics of Future Connect Beaverton students are 82% of Beaverton students are low income, 65% of all Future Connect Beaverton students are either actively enrolled or completed the college to date. Students who complete Future Connect average about 102 college credits upon completion. By cutting Future Connect funding completely, will not only serve as a means to fail the community by no longer supporting future leaders, but will also affect several students like me. I can speak for most of the Future Connect participants by saying this program has been such a positive impact, not just in educational careers, but also in personal lives. As an undocumented student, I just wanted to say that we are very limited on many sources. I have faced homelessness, food insecurity, and dealing with family members in serious substance use, which forced me to step in as a parental figure. If it weren't for Future Connect, I would absolutely have no other form of pursuing my education, and I am looking forward to continuing my career in the medical field, as I would I will be returning to school this coming fall. I asked to please reconsider cutting Future Connect because it is essential, and I just wanted to thank you guys for the opportunity for me to speak and advocate for Future Connect. Thank you.
Thanks, Esmeralda.
Okay, next up, we have Mark Holiday. Holiday.
I'm Mark Holiday, and I've lived in South Beaverton for 14 years. I supervise the volunteer communications group at the Beaverton Emergency Management Office, the Beaverton Emergency Radio Team, or BERT. When I count the members on the budget committee, I see 9 volunteers on the website. First, thank you for your work. Second, notice the number of support staff you have, starting with the finance department. Imagine instead that you had just 2 FTE employees, the finance manager and an assistant, to help you prepare the city's budget. Could you do it satisfactorily? Would you trust the city's budget to be fiscally sound? Now imagine that during one of your meetings, you discovered a neighborhood gas leak. In Certland, that really happened. The result, emergency management put theory into practice and proceeded with evacuation and sheltering. How? By coordinated deployment of emergency resources, including CERT volunteers. BERT, like CERT, is a force multiplier. Every week, we have a weekly check-in of other radio operators. BERT also trains radio operators to get on the air, as a previous commentator noted. Last month, I finished the class and helped 7 people press their mic and use the radio. I used city facilities arranged by city staff and city radios purchased by city staff. Let me ask you, if there were an earthquake tonight, how many staff will the city go through before it figures out how to find a single ham operator to effectively respond to that emergency? I know 40, but I can't contact them. Remove 2 FTE from the emergency management budget, and you turn what was a force multiplier into a manpower reducer. I used to be in the Army. For every infantryman, there were 4 people in the background supporting that soldier. You may not see CERT. You may not have known that BERT existed, but take away the emergency management support and you'll see a gaping hole left behind. The city will lose its ability to serve those in need. I urge you to reinstate the funding for the emergency management office. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, next up, we have Danielle Mayenger. Oops. And they must have had a, okay, back.
Hello.
Danielle. There you are. Okay, very good.
Hello, Budget Committee. First, I would like to thank you for the hard work you are doing to solve the budget issues for the city of Beaverton. My name is Danielle Meininger, and I'm a proud member of SEIU Sublocal 198. I want to specifically address the cutting of nearly half the staff and hours of the Murray Shoals Branch Library at a time when their services are becoming increasingly valuable. The branch library staff came to the assistance of the main library just 2 months into the COVID shutdown. They helped us open the doors to the library before any other city services, besides the first responders, were there. When we were opened our doors, there were literal tears of joy and dancing from community members. To me, this is the mark of an impact of impact and respect from our community. To date, Murray Shoals has had over 4,000 people in 2023. 4,000 people attend programs at that location, which is 1/4 of the total amount that the library has had. They do so much with just 13 people. Please reconsider cutting staff and hours from this valuable and hardworking library. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Danielle.
Chair, that completes the list of individuals who have raised their hand. And so I believe we are ready to proceed with the meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, all the speakers, for your well thought out comments. Now we're going to move to the Finance Director's presentation of the Public Works, the Street Fund, Water Fund, Sewer Fund, Stormwater Fund, and then the Building Fund.
And I apologize, I can't find the unshare. There we go. Sorry.
We're going to start with the building fund. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So our building fund is funded through building permit fees paid by developers and property owners. Those fees increase each year in February by CPI. Our last CPI increase was 8.06. As you all know, the CPI has been pretty high, but our building fund is stable. And so, sorry about that. If you look that we're actually growing a little bit in the building fund. So one of the, and our next CPI increase is slated for February 2024, but we're looking at doing a comprehensive fee study, and we would be looking at building fees as well. You don't want your enterprise funds to grow, or your internal service funds to grow. They really should be, they need to be self-sustaining, but they also need to not be charging too much money. So that's one of the things that we want to look at and continue to watch the building fund. It's a very healthy fund, and we need to make sure that it is not charging too much. Our capital development fund, this budget's for the non-transportation capital projects. Funding comes from a variety of sources, our general fund, grants, donations, other governments. So the projects included in here for the current fiscal year or the upcoming fiscal year would be the year-round Beaverton shelter and completion of the Public Safety Center and the Patricia Research Center for the Arts. Those projects are almost completed, but there's still a little bit of work to do. So overall, this particular fund is recognizing some large grants for the Beaverton shelter. So you see some in the intergovernmental revenue, there's pretty large growth there. And it also repays loaned funds from the general fund and the transient lodging tax fund for those completed projects. So the projects that were funded through the TLT and the general fund would be the Patricia Research Center for the Arts, which is almost completed. So there was some money loaned initially from the general fund that was not needed to complete that project, so we repaid that. In our street fund, so our street fund does have a structural deficit. I should have put that first, but I did put it last. I'll say it again. The street fund is funded by gas taxes, and right-of-way fees and vehicle registration fees. So our current gas tax for the state of Oregon is 38 cents a gallon. That's going to increase by 2 cents to 40 cents a gallon in January 1st. Washington County charges an additional 1 cent per gallon for their gas tax. And this is used to maintain our pavement, to maintain our current pavement condition index. We do need to make larger investments into our street network. So we really need to be looking at this fund and working on, making sure that we are prioritizing our projects with the limited resources that we have in the street fund right now, because that fund does have a structural deficit. So overall, you see our street fund, we added an assistant traffic engineer to the street, to the programs this year. That is to create a succession planning. We really didn't have that middle step to begin to training our replacements, our future replacements. So we did add an assistant traffic engineer, and also our traffic engineer is super busy. So this will help alleviate some of the work that he's working on and allow some more space. It also does include a carryover for vehicle replacements. And unfortunately, we did have to reduce the initial ask for projects in order to balance this budget. So we did pretty much the same amount of reduction in the main projects that this fund does every year, which would be street reconstruction, the ADA ramp retrofits. Those are the cuts in the sidewalks for and the arterial reconstruction. So those 3 projects all got a little haircut this year in order to balance the budget. And again, I'll say it, this fund does have a structural deficit. We need to do a little work here. So for our utility funds, that would be water, sewer, and storm drain. They are funded by our ratepayers. We have a fixed rate and a consumption-based rate. The budget assumes a $35 million bond issuance to further our work in our regional water system. Rate increases are included in our 10-year plan that was shown to council prior. We will be, we revise these plans every year, make sure that they're accurate, because as you complete a year, you get your actuals, you want to make sure your out years are still accurate. So that 10-year plan has some, the rates needed to increase in order to maintain the necessary funding to build the cash in order to issue the bonds needed to build the projects that we have committed to on a regional basis. So, and that would be related to the WIFIA loan and the WWS program and future capital needs. So that is laid out in the 10-year plan on how we need to build the rates, to build the cash flow to cover the future bond needs. Our sewer fund has a fixed and consumption-based fees also, but they're both a local rate for the city and a regional rate for clean water services. And our storm drain rates also are just a fixed monthly charge, but they're based on equivalent service units, where one ESU equals a residential house, and then they have separate local and regional rates similar to the sewer fund. So our water fund for this year, we have added 6 utility worker positions. 3 are to further our automated meter interface. That's not really easy to say, but the AMI project. 3 are for meter reading, and they would be picked up mid-year with the meter reading beginning July 1st, 2024. So we would have 6 months where they would be trained, probably along with this AMI staff, in all things meter, so that come July 1st, they're ready to start reading our meters and helping with that. That meter reading is offset with savings from our current contracts. So we actually will save a little bit of money on a go forward basis. It does include a rate increase, and I'll get to that in a minute. And one thing that I think the staff really wanted to impress on the council and the budget committee is that our water fund is transitioning from a very intense capital focus to a more maintenance focus. And also, this is the 4th year of our WIFIA loan supported projects. So those are kind of set out on the projects that we need to do. The residential, so I wanted to show you the impact of the rate increase. So an increase in water delivery charges is included in the budget. It's we would be bringing, so this isn't a done deal, it's included in the budget, but it will be a public hearing in front of the council in September to get approval on those rates. And so here's an example of the change in rates. So for water, the total change is $5.50. When you get to the sewer fund, our sewer fund is fairly stable, and there are no really big changes in this budget. Our sewer rates are charged based on average usage of water in the winter months. So, you know, that kind of, it tells you in the winter months, people are not irrigating. So during those periods of time, you get a good solid view of the amount of water being used by the inside of the house. So that's what we charge the sewer on, is because the water used inside the house is what goes down the drain. So our residential sewer rate increase, we are proposing an increase. The increase is $2.24. So this is an example of a household with an average usage of something cubic feet of water, but I can't remember what they told me like 3 times what that was, but I cannot remember what the first C is. It's some sort of measurement, but it's the cubic feet of water. And again, these rate increases will come forward for future council approval. both the city and Clean Water Services have rate increases coming in fiscal year 24. Our storm drain, so the rates are fixed monthly charge. They're based on equivalent service units, ESUs. One ESU equals a residential house. So you'll see some are charged, so you kind of look at the size and there's different ESUs based on what it is you are looking at. So they consist of a local portion, which is what the city receives, and there is a regional portion that Clean Water Services receives. We are working on a storm drain master plan. It's almost complete. So because we are not complete with that plan, we are still not showing any significant changes in this fund. That plan will inform what we need to do as far as projects so that we can work on those in the future after the plan is complete and we figure out what the implementation strategy is. So here's an impact of our storm drain rate increase. So the city is 11 cents, Clean Water Services 51 cents for a total of 62 cents. And so here's the total impact on a utility bill. And again, this is for a typical residential house using 8 cubic feet of water. It is an $8.36 increase or 6.5%. And that's the end of this portion. And then I can talk about capital. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Ashley?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Debbie. There was a couple of funds in this group that you reviewed that you said there was a structural deficit there. And I'm curious what is the technique this year? Because with like street fund, for example, I would think we can reduce the projects. I know that some of this is deferring maintenance, right? And so we have to really make sure we're being intentional about what gets deferred or what, is postponed or even taken off the list. But I'm curious, what are the techniques then? This year is the first of many years that we're looking at the structural deficit across the whole budget, but in these fund specific structural deficits, can you share if there's a specific technique we're looking at this year to get that closer to balanced?
So that's part of the CIP discussion, but I'll answer it now. This year, the city did do a pilot project on scoring and ranking projects that informs what rises to the top and is the most pressing need. Of course, with any pilot project, you have your lessons learned and you go back, you tweak it a little bit, and you come back with a better product. So that is what we're working on right now. But that they took all the existing projects that were in the queue and going forward and scored them this year using that process. And that is, how those projects come forward. Now, being the street fund, there are typical projects done every year in the street fund. Because you need to continue to do those overlays and make sure your streets don't deteriorate. We just don't have enough money in that fund to do all the things we need to do. So that's where the ranking is really important, to make sure that we're pulling the most needed projects forward as we look at how can we right size these funds. And so there's a lot of work to do, but it's good work. And the CIP team is doing a great job in this pilot project on how we're going to rank our projects, because going forward, we're always going to have an issue with competing needs. And so a ranking kind of data-driven process is really going to be something that we're going to rely on heavily in the future, as there are always going to be needs that outstrip what we have funding for.
Thank you.
John had a question.
Yeah, Debbie, I'm struggling a little bit with this additional FTE for an associate traffic engineer in a fund that is structurally in deficit. And so help me understand, I think you said for transition planning or something like that. Like, is that not outsourceable? Like, if that's the primary function, like, why are we doing an FTE? That's not something that would happen in the private world. We would send that out, get it done, and be done with it. That's not a ongoing thing, particularly if we have a structural deficit, and particularly with all the other cuts that we're making. This seems very odd. Help me understand this.
I'll let Jen.
I chime in. So this was something that actually I've had conversations with the council from the about 2 years ago to now in doing succession planning and traffic engineering, and also trying to address some of the workload because we are anticipating shifts in staffing over the next couple of years. And so this is an effort to proactively gain some institutional knowledge as we know that transitions are going to come up. So this was a key opportunity for us to be able to do it. I understand the challenges that it requires for us to balance the budget, but this is an investment that we're making, understanding that this is a priority for the council, and it especially comes for transportation, and making sure that we are building in your principles around multimodal and things of that nature.
And that could not be accomplished other than the institutional knowledge with a consultant to come in and do or something for a one-time cost. Because again, I think if we do this, that person's going to be an FTE forever. That position is, for the one-time project. And I get the institutional knowledge, right? Like is the staff moves away, we have someone ready to go, but then they'll probably be backfilled again. And so it's just like this ever increasing thing. And I'm just really concerned about it, particularly with the optics of all the other cuts and all of the stuff that's going on right now.
Well, and as you heard last night at the Bureau meeting, there are some really large transportation projects coming forward, and our current traffic engineer is very busy and doesn't get all the things done that need to get done. So this is a way to build the bandwidth within that program to make sure that we continue to deliver really good projects for you.
Okay, thanks. Teresa's up, and could we take the question slide down while we're talking here? Teresa?
Yes, thank you, Chair. One of my 2 questions that I had was asked already. Thank you, Councillor Duggar, for asking that question. In a time that we are pinching for pennies, it feels like, where we have valued employees and residents alike whose jobs are on the line, to add a position potentially permanent. It was well said, so I'll just say that, and it will be up for discussion, I'm certain, as the meeting goes along. My question, Debbie, on slide number 8 regarding the water fund, and it was discussed as well as in our handout binder in regards to the savings that we can expect, particularly in 2024. I failed to see, but the significance of that dollar amount, and maybe I need a refresher for my understanding on the buckets of funds for water funding specifically, that the funds for water go back into the funds for water, not going into the general fund. Is that correct? And my point in asking that question is, if we have a surplus of money left over in regards to the water fund referenced on slide 8, if that can be reallocated to the general fund, because it will be desperately needed over the next 4 fiscal years.
Yeah, unfortunately, no, you cannot take ratepayer money that is meant to maintain the utility system and put it into the general fund. That's just not legal. We can't do it. With the city, you have specific funds, and you can, in some cases, you can transfer money from one to another, but in some cases you simply cannot. So within the water fund, there are a couple different water funds. There's just the regular operating fund, there's a capital fund, and there's a debt service fund. You can move money from the operating fund into the debt service fund, because that's, the intention was that the ratepayers would pay for the project that you did. So you have to be very careful to keep your water funds segregated from your general fund.
Thanks for that explanation. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad that Councilor Duggar and Teresa mentioned the assistant transportation engineer. I'm looking at the budget right now. It looks like the city transportation engineer is a 0.7 FTE position. Is that right?
No, it's just, it's funded in different sources. So he's not 100% funded in the street fund.
I see.
The general fund and partially funded, mostly funded through the general or through the street fund because that's most of where his work is, but partially funded through the general fund because when you're in meetings and other things, you're not doing street work. So there's
Okay.
a portion that needs to be in the general fund and a portion that goes to the street fund.
Okay, and is there a specific area of work or responsibility that the assistant engineer would have?
It would be taking off some of that street fund work, doing that, you know, that interim level, so that frees our traffic engineer to go and do some of those higher level work that is getting kind of pinched right now because you got to do all of the work right now. So and I'm sure that our assistant city manager Dan could give you a much more thorough explanation than I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dan Weinheimer, Assistant City Manager. The traffic engineer, just to try to talk a little bit about the rationale behind the ask for the assistant position. We have legal liability when it comes to approving plans and some of the activities are related to designing our streets, managing our streets, response to accidents that happen, all kinds of things. And right now that body of work is really handled by one person. We have 4 FTE in that team. And so what we're proposing is to add a body and honestly thinking about this in more of a transitional way, kind of a little bit of an overhire, so some overlap so that we're able to train that individual up. But we're also conscious, as I think Debbie mentioned, of the need in that division where when it comes to the loop project, complete streets, some of the efforts that are coming across from the transportation planning side. We have a process that essentially moves from planning to implementation on the engineering side. And we're just aware that there are a lot of projects that are going to need to be managed. So that's really the thought behind the overhire process here and trying to use some of the street funds for this position.
Thanks, Dan. Nadia's up.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I don't have a question. I just have 2 comments. One, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge all the folks that testified. That was more testimony than I'd anticipated, but super happy to hear from the community and make sure we're taking really diligent notes. Some of y'all do know I'm operating out of the East Coast today. I had some stuff going on, so just wanted to put that out there so that y'all know I'm super excited to be here and continue this conversation.
Thank you. Well, any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, now on to the capital improvement program, Debbie.
Dave, I have a quick question. Again, I put my name on the chat. I don't know if it's fine.
Oh, okay. Sorry, John.
Debbie, so the associate traffic engineering position, is that fully funded by the street fund or was there a general fund portion as well?
I don't remember. I think it's fully funded by the street fund.
Okay, and that would confirm. I didn't see anything in the general fund for an associate traffic engineer. So
Right, and like I said, this fund has a structural deficit. There's a lot of work to be done to see, and part of what we want to do in the coming year is look at like a cost allocation plan to see, are we properly charging people for the work they're doing? So again, that will get addressed and make sure that we are not overburdening our street fund with people in the street fund. That's one of the things I want to make sure that we're not overburdening it by the staff being in the street fund.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. No further comments. Debbie, do you want to tackle the capital improvement program budget?
Sure. Can you all see it?
Yep.
All right. So as I was explaining to Councilmember Hartmeyer-Prigg, how projects get on the list is we have a CIP prioritization program. So we are using a data-driven scoring rubric to rank our potential projects for your consideration. So the pilot project for this was completed this fiscal year. It scored our existing projects. And like I said, from that, you get lessons learned and you can tweak your program to make sure that all projects have a chance. The first time I did this, I can tell you no building projects ranked anywhere near where they needed to be. So we needed to tweak it so that building projects actually got done as well. So these projects are scored on 8 categories that have been approved by council. I'm not going to read them to you, but these were vetted through the. These are the categories we want to score on and make sure that we are considering these things. So on the categories of funding, so we look at where our funds come from. So we get funds from rates and charges for our enterprise funds, the funds we just talked about, water, sewer, storm drain. We prioritize in those funds, we have to prioritize in debt service first, and then operations and maintenance. So all debt service gets prioritized first, and then the remainder can go for operations and maintenance. So that's really how those enterprise funds get their money, and how the funds are prioritized for spending. We also receive state and county gas tax and vehicle registration fees. Those are constitutionally required to be spent on transportation projects within the right of way. So those we get system development charges. Those are money that's collected on development for expansion of this, for expansion of system, not for operations. So as you build new construction, you have to expand your system to be able to handle the new residents or businesses that are going to come in and affect your system. So we need to make sure that those are as you're able to expand your system as needed. And that works for water, sewer, storm drain, and transportation funds. We also, the general fund is a source for capital improvement projects. We have not recently used the general fund because we just don't have excess money. But one of the goals should be that a percentage of your general fund each year does go to capital projects where there are no other sources of funding. You need to be able to plug your general fund into capital. And we're not in a situation like that yet, but that's the goal. And then we have BURA, the Beaverton Urban Renewal Agency. The BURA gets their money from tax increment. And they use that on infrastructure projects within their boundaries. So overall, you're not supposed to see be able to read the chart, but it's to give you an idea that we do a 5-year plan. This is the kind of a snapshot of the WIFIA project, and so that you can see it shows 22-23, but it's a multi-year project. It goes out through 29-30. So that's the WIFIA project. Most of our CIP projects do take multiple years, and you have to plan them, you have to design them, and then you have to construct them, and then you have to make sure that all the things that you needed to be done were done correctly. So we do a 5-year plan. It's multiple overlapping projects, so it's very complicated. And what I want to let you know is, so last year a 5-year plan was approved. This year, we started with the second year of last year's plan, and we built off of that. So every year we take what was done the prior year and we build off of that. And we hopefully are really in line with what we said our third year was going to be last year, but we'll see, plans change. So for our significant multi-year projects, we have the WIFIA program. There are 26 projects financed with $165.5 million WIFIA loan. This includes Purple Pipe and the North Transmission Line. We're in year 4 of a 7-year implementation on that program. We have the Willamette Water Supply Program, and that's in partnership with our regional water suppliers to supply water from the Willamette River. Beaverton is a 5% partner in that program. All the projects are in construction and will be completed and operational by 2026. And then there is some risk of additional cost, but it's lower now because the projects are under construction. That That risk is really more in that design phase and the initial construction, but once they're under construction, unless they find something really bad in the ground when they're digging, then it should be a little bit, there's a little less risk there. And one thing that we are doing is starting implementation of a new stormwater master plan. So we want to make sure that the plan's almost completed. We want to make sure that we have a good solid implementation on how we plan to do that over the multi-years it's going to take to implement. And we are completing Western Allen Boulevard. So that's our significant multi-year projects. And then the significant updates that our wonderful CIP team wanted me to pass along is they are starting preliminary design on the loop. They're finishing the negotiations with Clean Water Services on a master intergovernmental agreement. We're finishing construction on the non-potable purple pipe treatment facility. Starting the updated transportation system plan, that's going to be a huge body of work for us, but very important for future funding. And we're starting the renovations at the shelter, wrapping up Cooper Mountain community and utility plans, and finalizing that stormwater master plan. So those are the major significant updates that are, that's what I had to share on CIP.
Thanks, Debbie. Are there any questions? Discussion? Teresa.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment, not so much a question, when we were going over slide 20 in regards to the cost of construction, that usually things don't cost more money unless they go wrong. And following the construction in Beaverton the last 3 to 5 years or so, particularly during COVID, when we saw the cost for building materials go up, and it felt like anything that can go wrong did go wrong at times. And with our budget already on a tight fence, I just want to say it out loud so that it's in everyone's minds that prices that are set for building materials can go up. The world is a crazy thing and a crazy place, and it only takes one major event in the world to set a catastrophic chain effect that could affect us. And so I once again will throw out there, as I pointed out with the water fund question, if funds can be reallocated, obviously for the WIFIA fund, if that is a possibility, to try not to pull money from the general fund, with which we don't have money to go around anyway. So comment to noodle on as we go through our next few fiscal years and all the things going on, not to say too many times that things won't cost more money, just throwing it out there, because having family and friends that are in construction, it does happen, even projecting over the next year or two calendar years, not just fiscal years. Thank you.
And I guess I neglected to say most of that's under contract and in construction. So that's why they felt that it's pretty stable at this point in time. And I do have to remind the committee that each fund in the city stands alone and does not share with other funds, particularly the enterprise funds. They're not allowed to. So it's the general fund is our only discretionary fund that is allowed to send its money elsewhere. And then funds that are funded by the general fund also can send their money elsewhere. But you really have to be consider each fund as its own bucket and that they don't share. So that's kind of how government accounting works. It's fund accounting. So
Ashley has a comment.
Thank you. So Debbie, I'm kind of curious I guess this kind of goes off of Board Member Payne's comments as well, I'm curious, like when I look in here, I see a lot of contingency, right? Because we can build contingency into each project's budget, but we don't really carry reserves generally for like a capital improvement project fund, right? Like we just do it within the projects themselves. Okay, I definitely think like come the day that we figure out the fixes to our structural deficit, right? And we kind of have a better like grip on our on this budget, because we really right now we're taking it year by year to get things to that place where the lines all go the direction we want. But I do think like having some sort of reserve in a fund like this could be really helpful for example, I mean, knowing each fund has its own thing, but like in street fund, when we have to look at deferring things, like having that reserve within each fund can really help us maybe with those emergency moments, those times that something came up unexpected. So maybe it could be a future goal for us to look at holding a reserve balance in funds like these, just since they are such large dollar things that need our investment.
And that wouldn't be what we would recommend necessarily, because each project in the CIP fund stands alone. And so each project has its own funding source. So there's not really, unless we're just sending some general fund money over there every year to hold it in the bank, that's not necessarily the best use of your money either. So you want to make sure that when I say that a percentage of your annual budget should go towards CIP, that's to do things like roof repairs and building stuff and other things that are don't get funding from other sources. So that's really where you want to make sure that you're doing that. But once you have a project, then that project has its funding sources and it has a contingency. So that would be its own little reserve. As projects complete, we send the money back to the original source of where the money came from.
Thank you.
Any other comments or issues with the capital improvement presentation? If not, I will now open a public hearing specifically for public comments on the proposed uses of state shared revenue. As I mentioned before, if you join the meeting by phone, you enter *9 to let the city recorder know you wish to speak, or you can use the raise hand feature if you're online. So is there anyone in the public who has a comment?
Chair, I will just point out that we do have a small, very, very small presentation. If Debbie wants to share her screen on state shared revenue, it just shows the uses of state shared revenue.
Is that it?
Next slide, right there. Right, so Beaverton does receive state shared revenue in the form of the state liquor tax, state cigarette tax, and state marijuana tax. Those are proposed to be used in the city's general fund. And we also receive state shared revenue in the form of the state gas tax, and that is recorded in the street fund. Beaverton is eligible to receive state shared revenue because we provide the services you see there on that slide. And so those are the proposed uses of state shared revenue within Beaverton's fiscal 23-24 budget. And so that is what this public hearing is about. And so in checking the attendee list, I see no people who want to comment on our uses of state shared revenue.
Okay, Allison, do you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get my name in the chat fast enough. This is just walking back, talking about the CIP. Is that okay if we reel it back in just for a second?
Well, we should probably close the public hearing officially first.
Yeah,
for state shared revenue.
Yeah, I now close the public hearing on the proposed uses of state shared revenue.
I really apologize. I'm looking at our capital improvement projects that we have underway, the ones that we're planning, and the ones that are kind of on the horizon is need to have, nice to have, want to have. And I just want to raise this. This isn't a tonight thing, but this is looking forward, given the constraints that we're facing on our budget, of going through this list with a fine-tooth comb and figuring out if there's things on here that we need to pause. for the foreseeable future until we get our hands wrapped around this budget and what our fiscal situation is going to look like going forward, especially given all the comments that we've gotten today. Obviously, there's a sense of urgency in the community around community-based funding, and a lot of expenditures that we have are coming out of capital improvement projects. So I just wanted to get that onto the record. And sorry I got it in so late.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Let's see, where are we? We're at public.
Reopen the public hearing.
Yeah, as a continuation of the public hearing on the proposed City of Beaverton fiscal year 2023-24 budget, is there anyone wishing to testify or to comment on the proposed budget?
And Debbie, you could probably advance your slide by one. I'm just going to pause for a minute to see if anyone wants to raise their hand and give public testimony on the city's budget who did not have a chance to speak earlier this evening. Chair, I see no hand raised, so therefore there is no one else who wishes to speak on the proposed budget. Oh, forgive me. It looks like Kate Arnold would like to address the committee one more time. Go ahead, Kate.
I just wanted to say, this is the first thing I've done with the city council and the budget committee since I became a volunteer and not a city councilor. And wow, you guys have a tough year and you're thinking about a lot of important things. And I just want to thank you for your time and your courage to put your ideas forward. And yeah, and again, I thank you for your time. And I think we have enough to figure things out as long as we put our altruistic energies forward. So thank you for what you do from a mom turned wow.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Are there any other public comments?
I see no other public comments.
Okay, so I now close the public hearing for the proposed City of Beaverton fiscal year 23-24 budget. Before we begin deliberations on the proposed budget, we need a motion to approve the proposed 23-24 budget as submitted. Is there such a motion?
Chair, this is Council Hartmeyer Prigg. I move that we approve the proposed City of Beaverton fiscal year 2023-24 budget as submitted, and to set the ad valorem tax rate for operations at 4.6180 per thousand of assessed valuation, and to set the property tax levy for general obligation debt at $2,315,000.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. So now discussion. Is there any discussion?
The mayor.
Oh, Lacey. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. We'll be talking about two amendments that I am going to be bringing forward here in a second. One is going to be directly related to Portland Community College and the other one to emergency management. I want to talk about a third one that I'm not able to do an amendment for tonight, and that is the library. I have spent probably close to 7 hours with the city manager this week looking at library staffing, and we have been pushing back and forth on each other, looking for solutions, trying to figure it out. I think most people know I have a young daughter. I have 2 young daughters now. We're heavy utilizers of the library. When one of the librarians was pregnant, my daughter felt so close to her, she wanted to name her baby. So this cut is incredibly difficult to us. The city manager included a map of those that are using the library and the budget meeting questions for the budget committee to review. We are subsidizing a large part of our unincorporated areas. And in past years, it's never been a problem. This is the hardest budget that I've tackled in my 10th budget. Councillor Arnold said it quite well, our former Councillor Arnold. This is a tough year. We are making tough decisions. As the mayor, I'm committed to working with the county on the WCCS distributions, given the fact that we're subsidizing so much more than our own residents here. As a matter of fact, a lot of our testimony came from people that live outside the city because they're going to be impacted by tonight's library budget decision. We don't take this lightly. This is the hardest thing that this council is going to do this year, is approve this budget. We've never had so much public comment. I think of all the years that I've ever been on the budget committee, it would be rare to have one person making a comment about the budget. We're committed to using our library bus to take to Murray Shoals. I asked the city manager to put it there on Fridays this summer so people could get used to the idea of what it looks like, and we could do outreach to figure out more on how to utilize that asset. My hope is this isn't a forever cut, but a cut that we have to do right now. So I want to thank the budget committee members. I want to thank the budget subcommittee for getting us here tonight. I'll introduce the two amendments when we get to that function.
Okay, are there any general questions about the budget before we get to the amendments? Kevin?
Oh, Ashley was in the chat right before me. So I'll defer to her first.
Oh, okay, Ashley.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think we just have a really tough budget ahead of us, and I have scoured this budget. I sent a lot of different types of questions in because we talked a lot last time about how like none of these decisions are going to feel good, and I really do think we have hard choices ahead of us. Last meeting, I kind of challenged us saying that there's a lot of budgets that are coming in pretty status quo. And I think the reason why the phrase was kind of hard for me was that for people whose jobs are affected, whether that means they have to do more or because they're losing their jobs, this isn't status quo for them. And we are having to really make drastic changes to put us in a place to be able to really survive as a city. We had an election last week and we saw some local jurisdictions lose out on some of their own levies. And so it really is important that we do our best to look within our budget as best we can in our operations. And so I do want to thank staff who also had to put forward such a challenging budget. So I'm looking forward to hearing the amendments. And I want to also just thank everyone for the time that has gone into this because it's a hard one.
Kevin. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, David. In the budget committee questions that were sent out on the Beaverton website, there was a question about providing management with a 3% raise versus a 5% raise, and how that would result if we did the 3% raise instead of the 5%, be about $721,000 of savings this year that would be restored or preserved. I was wondering if staff could touch on that question a little bit, or management could touch on that question a little bit.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and then if there's others that want to contribute at the staff level, please do. So one of the reasons why keeping the management perspective at the 5% is because we have some compensation and classification issues that we're grappling with, and we do need to do a comprehensive review of that. We also have it at the non-represented level as well. And so we need to shore that up. The problem is when you start holding back the cost of living adjustments, that exacerbates our problem. And during the last budget, I made an effort to hold that at 3%. We did not have the data collected at the time, and then subsequently worked with finance and HR to understand what would that look like if we held the line on that. And it actually compounds the problem where we would be digging ourselves out of a compensation hole that we couldn't right size facing this budget that we have. And so it was important to try to maintain that because we also want to retain our staff. I have to say that when you are dealing with struggles like this, you will have people considering leaving, and turnover could be a real thing. So there's a lot of strategy and thought behind holding the line and keeping it consistent with what the other labor groups are receiving, just because of those impacts.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Amy? Amy? Okay, you're muted, Amy.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Along the lines of the library, I couldn't find the answer to this myself, but it looks like a couple weeks ago, there was a post for a community engagement supervisor. And I wondered if someone could help answer whether that had been part of the plan to not continue to pursue that position, or if that open position would have any impact, for example, if it wasn't pursued, if that could potentially bring about a shift because of the savings on the current proposal of cutting staff that we've seen in the budget.
I'll let either Sia Lindstrom, our Assistant City Manager, or Glenn Ferguson answer that question.
Sure, I'm happy to take that, Jenny. This is Glenn Ferdman, Beaverton City Library Director. Thank you, Amy, for the question. Yeah, that position became vacant fairly recently, well into the budget process, and that's really a critical position for us in our community engagement team, which is actually a council priority. One of the 22 council priorities to expand our outreach to the community, because that's one of our critical services. That position is responsible, for example, helping to launch our new bookmobile, which we're all very excited about. So we looked at that as we do every opening. Is this something that we could keep open, keep vacant for the sake of budgetary purposes? But given the critical nature of that position and all that it does to support that team, we really need to fill it. So we're actually in recruitment as we speak.
Thank you. I have one other question, but do I need to wait for someone else to go next?
No, go ahead and ask.
Oh, yeah, you can go ahead now.
Okay, thanks. If there was, I'm not sure if this has been done before, but if there was an opportunity to do a fundraising campaign and people wanted to donate specifically to the city, is that an opportunity where we could try to drive up revenue for the library, for example, or do people have to earmark funds? And is that something that the budget committee has looked at? I know some of you have had a lot more experience here than I have about trying to drive up donated funds.
Sounds familiar.
I think Glenn's going to chime in.
I'm happy to take that one. Yes, there's numerous opportunities to donate to the library, and that includes the Friends of the Library as well as the Library Foundation, both of whom provide direct support for the library in terms of programs and also for capital projects such as our 2018 space plan, which you built out 4 study rooms, converted a computer classroom to a makerspace. So yes, I would encourage anyone who is interested in helping to support the library that way, go to our website, click on the support button, and you've got a couple opportunities there to contribute and to donate. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add to that, you know, donations are not a reliable source of revenue, so it wouldn't supplant our revenue necessarily. What the donations typically do, they either come in earmarked for a specific thing, or we use them for a one-time investment into the program, but it cannot be used really for ongoing unless you have an actual really ongoing commitment.
Let me jump in here real quickly before Nadia. Since I sound like a broken record here, a lot of organizations use, or state-funded organizations, city-funded organizations, use terminal positions like a 2-year position to kick off a fundraising or development campaign. That development campaign really isn't, you know, a risky sense of money like a donation might be. You can send out a letter and get donations, but as Debbie mentioned, it's not a steady stream of revenue. However, if you have a development process, and higher education, for example, does it all the time, you can have a steady stream of money coming in for a long period of time. However, that does involve some sort of startup funding. That was done, for example, for the Arts Center. So just a thought. I've been suggesting that for the library. I think the library could realize some significant revenue that way, but you know, it does take time. Nadia.
Actually, Brian right before me.
Oh, okay. Brian, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, Chair. Two questions. The first one is I didn't notice actually until the city manager's intro of this meeting that for the general fund, the ending fund balance actually does slightly exceed the target reserve. And I had missed that in the city manager's message regarding the entire budget. Do we have a dollar amount by which the general fund ending fund balance exceeds the reserve for this year?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Looking at the slide from the intro, I think it was like the fourth slide with the chart on it. It just eyeballing it, it looks like about $2 million. Is that like ballpark for that, the balance exceeding the target?
You know, I just don't have that number.
Are you, I'm sorry, Brian, are you talking about in year ending 22?
I am talking about, no, fiscal year 24 proposed on the fourth slide of your intro presentation. It has page number 1 at the top, but I think it was just inserted at the, you know, mispaginated. Fiscal year 24 proposed, it's got the ending fund balance slightly above that dotted line target number. Then the two come for like meet for fiscal year 25 before the fund balance drops off a cliff in subsequent years. But what's the cushion for this fiscal year for 24? Is the question.
And I don't know. I don't have a number.
We can try to track down that for you, Brian, offline while the committee's having a conversation. I could tell you the fund balance, and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, correct right now is a slightly under 10. It's like 9.8, and Susan Cole may be able to verify that. That's the current projected fund balance for the budget right now.
Yeah, I'm working on the answer, and I'll just note that many of our reserves are designated. So I think Jenny mentioned, as the committee continues this conversation, I will continue the looking up the answer.
Well, thank you. And just to make sure I'm understanding it, that I mean, I believe that Jenny mentioned a target of, was it like 11% of expenditures? Yes, okay. So
and I don't feel like that's high enough, by the way.
Fair enough. But am I like, if we accept the premise that that is the target, to have that reserve cushion for unanticipated expenditures, supplemental budgets, what have you, am I correct that exceeding that with this fund balance, it does mean that there is a little bit more money in the general fund that hasn't been already allocated in the proposed budget?
That I couldn't verify, because sometimes what comes into mostly what comes into your fund balance, those are one-time revenues. And so to say that you have a cushion, you can't rely on that to supplant ongoing expenses. You really need to be very intentional when you use fund balance or reserves. Sometimes we have what's called a contingency, where there's a little bit more flexibility, but again, that's usually one-time in nature. And so my concern is that we need to have enough funding so that when we do need to pivot, where if, for instance, we have to make deeper cuts that might just not be able to be supported by the community, we need to be able to have enough reserves to be able to hold our own until we can really truly find either a revenue solution or an expenditure one. So those are things that we just can't rely on to just use because we need them in supplemental. We have to be very calculated when we use them. This is just kind of me, just a little bit on my philosophy and experience with those, because once they're gone, they're gone.
Fair enough. Thank you. And maybe we might have a more precise answer at some point.
Trying to look at how much of that's above the purple line is undesignated. So that's what she's trying to figure out right now.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that. The other question I had was just digging in slightly to Councilor Peters' question regarding the COLA for management. And I understand that there's a 5% COLA for union represented or 2 union represented staff groups, and that's under contract. The inflation projections for 2023 are like 3.3%, and for 2024 are 2.4%. So we are talking about a COLA that exceeds the cost of living, that the inflated cost of living over the next couple of years. Regarding the salary compaction concerns, are we talking about a risk that of like an actual inverse where supervisors are being paid below the labor represented people that they are supervising, or getting within 5% of that, or how big a gap are we talking about if management does get a lower COLA than other staff?
I think over time that gap can exceed something by 5%. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I don't want to misspeak on that topic. I think the issue though also is that beyond just the compaction issue, but it's also a lack of competitiveness. We now cannot compete with Hillsborough. We cannot compete with the county. There are other cities that Portland, of course, and most people can't compete with. And so we are losing some of our talent there. And we are doing actually really great work in trying to retain people within the resources that we have. So that's another issue. And just to clarify, SEIU's contract is very different than BPA's. So those numbers are different and the language is different, which drives why SEIU received a 5% increase. And it has to do with the cost of living, and there's a cap and a ceiling that it cannot exceed. But the BPA contract is structured very differently.
Oh, I see. So am I misstated? Is it not a 5% increase on the BPA contract for BPA numbers?
No, it's negotiated to a single number for a multi-year contract. And I don't have, again, that number in front of me, but that is very different language than SEIU. Their language is different, and it has a floor to ceiling type of narrative in their contractual language. So they did receive a 5%, which is the ceiling, which is the cap. And it's really historically has never gone up that high. And so they usually have hovered around 3% in the past.
Thank you.
Okay, Nadia.
Well, now I have more questions since Brian went before me. So I'll start with the questions that come from Brian's questions. And I don't need this question right away, but I'd love to just hear this. Like, what is the highest union paid range and what is the lowest management pay? Because that's an important data point to understand when we're talking about 3% and 5%. So I don't think that you guys can give that to me on the spot, but if someone can maybe just give me an idea. I'm sure there's a table that helps us understand like what's the highest, like what's the cap, right, of union, and then what's the bottom of management. Jenny, is it common to have different types of contracts with different unions across cities? Is it not like, because as Brian was talking, I was like, okay, I know that I've said in meetings that I'd like to see these unions be more similar, just from a bigger picture. Is that normal? Can we work towards that? What do you think?
So I can tell you,
You're muted, Jenny.
It's like, is it me?
You guys are awesome. So the value of the contract for different unions is different, right? Because there's different components. Police is very different. They have different types of overtime issues. They have specialty pays, so that drives contract price and structure. That being said, things that you want to try to kind of streamline in contracts are everyone gets entitled to the same benefits and the same access and all of those things. And that's very important. And so I think we are working towards that so that there's equity in the way that we treat our represented folks. But with respect to the amount that is that's contractually negotiated in terms of increases, that does vary by union. It could be the same, it could also be different. It just depends on the circumstances. And same thing with language. But those are things, if you want a city manager's perspective, I would like to see some of that equalized, if you will, from an equity perspective. But sometimes those jobs that they do are very different and unique, and that drives sometimes those changes. And I want to be mindful that, you know, we shouldn't probably get into details about this too, because we do have contracts that are expiring and we will be getting ready to go into negotiations within the next year. So I want to be mindful of these conversations.
Okay. I mean, I do want to signal, right, like what is possible to be as alike in the contracts without going super right in places that we aren't. I think that it is important that we work towards that. I just wanted to take a moment. I know I did it earlier, but, you know, obviously we heard 3 themes of public comment. You know, one was around the library, which I do feel really concerned about. I think investing in our libraries is a public safety issue, community issue. It's an issue that we need to take the time to spend and think about. And so I hope there are ways for us to address that. I know we also heard from the folks talking about the CERT program and want to, you know, I'm looking forward and hoping to hear what amendments I think the mayor suggested. And then also for Portland Community College, you know, I think this is another an economic justice program in terms of the way that we build justice for our community. I don't have any formal amendments that I'll be proposing. A little bit of context, not that you need to know this much, but there was a death, and so I'm actually out of town and had a memorial today, so I'm trying to stay on top and be here. But I want to go on record to talk about the importance more on the budget, on the council, that rather than the budget committee. You know, we've transitioned to this council manager form of government, and you know, we're in it. But I continue to feel like we need to make sure we're getting oversight on people and programs on a higher level and on a department level. And these are things that I've shared with Jenny, but I will continue to share with you all. And so I'm very hopeful that, you know, in the future budget, that what we're able to do once we set our sort of high level policies and priorities, that we're able to look in, you know, January, February and understand what programs, what opportunities, what really supports our values, and really understand that. You know, several years ago, we had you know, tons of people calling and talking about looking at alternatives to public safety and what public safety looks like and what we can do. And I'd really like to at some point start signaling what does alternatives, you know, what does alternatives public safety response look like? I don't have that answer today. I didn't have time to come up with that answer, but I'm really hopeful that we're able to work towards that answer. I think that the PCC program and the library program, these are investments in our community. And if we can make the investments in our community, then we can really start to shape what this city and what Beaverton stands for. So just wanted to share those words. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. Rachel.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Building on Amy's question about fundraising for the library, I understand that you know, one-time fundraisers do not answer a structural question, but I was curious, like, you know, we saw a ton of energy and an outpouring from the public about really caring about their library, and I really care about the library. And like, you know, if we saw, you know, a lot of people stepping up and saying, you know, donating and saying to the funds that Glenn pointed out, would it be possible to keep the library open another day? Like if we saw those funds come in July or August, is that even something possible that we could make happen?
So one of the challenges is that, you know, keeping the library open, depending on what you're looking at, right? Because you need people to be on the desks, you need programming folks, can be $250,000. And then you would need to maintain that going forward. So that means that your level of fundraising would have to be significant year over year over year. So could it be done? Maybe. But is it reliable? Not, and maybe not. And so my concern in that, not that we wouldn't want to look at that as an opportunity to support programming, would be that, let's say that you're successful and you raise the amount of funds that you need, but you only could do it for 1 year, then you're opening and then closing, opening and closing. So again, continuity is really important for our constituents. So we may have to think about the best way to apply that said funding that comes in if we want to pursue something a little bit more aggressively. So that's kind of one of the challenges around that.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Just to follow up something you just said there. I think I heard you say the cost per day for each week that the library would be open is about $250,000 for each additional day. Is that right?
That's just the general estimate, and it depends on how you do the math. So I'm going to let the experts do it, and let me know what the range is.
So, yeah, thank you, Councilor Teeter. We looked at the numbers and it depends on what level of service you're talking about. If we're, for example, if we're just talking about keeping the branch library open an additional day, a 5th day, as opposed to just 4 days a week. So the proposed budget would have the branch library open 4 days a week. If we're talking about keeping it open 1 additional day, 5 days a week, no additional programming, just keeping the library open. That's all. We could possibly do that by an increase of approximately $111,000, but that's just the bare minimum. Again, just keeping the doors open, making sure we have minimum coverage at the desks, no additional programming. So it really all depends on the level and the type of service that you're looking at. So it's sort of like, you know, it's like choosing a car. Do you want to go? I'm not going to name brands because I don't want to offend anybody, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So really the same thing is true with respect to the library. So we have a variety of ways we can crunch the numbers depending on the council's appetite for the level of service and their willingness to find some way to fund it.
And if I could add one, I'm sorry, Kevin, if I could add one comment just to wrap up Glenn's, is that when you make decisions like that, and let's say for all intents and purposes, it's the time or it's the number that Glenn shared, which I think in all likelihood would probably be up a little bit higher than that. There needs to be a corresponding reduction. And so once you get to like the 100,000, 150,000, I want you to think in your mind, I want you to equate that with an employee that's providing service somewhere else, because that is where we're at. So for every $100,000 needs to be changed, I'm going to be looking at a body. I'm going to be looking at a level of service. That is how challenging this budget is. So we really need to think about the trade-offs very intentionally if we want to start moving chess pieces around. And I think that gives kind of pause and perspective, because we need to understand where that other expense is going to come from when we start kind of looking at trying to add back days or hours or programming, or for that matter, we have other reductions in this budget in the general fund that touch other services too. And if people want to alter those, they have the same equation that they have to solve.
Thanks.
Okay, Hugh?
Yeah, thanks everybody. Not to beat this horse any further, like many on this call have spoken today, and as an educator, it's painful for me to see these cuts happening to the libraries. I know that when resources and support for libraries increase, students' reading and math scores across tests increase as well. And especially in the last few years, we've seen these scores fall in nearly every state in the country. I firmly believe this cut will keep exacerbating this decline during a critical time when young folks are just needing more help. I think I read in the Q&A that $1 million is needed to be reduced from expenditures in order to balance the budget. Perhaps outside of this meeting, I'd be curious to know what those scenarios are, if possible. I'd make the challenge to look to see if any amendment can be made where instead of filling the gap, we can just reduce the gap, if possible. And again, I appreciate those that took the time and effort to analyze these scenarios. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments before we get to the agenda or the amendments, excuse me?
I do have one comment. So Susan did find the number that Brian was looking for. It's a little under $2.8 million, but as Jenny said, that was one-time money that we deliberately did not use to balance our budget because we were looking at a $10 million structural deficit. we did use some one-time money to balance this budget because it was important to fund those one-time things such as some roof design for roof replacements, some carryover, those kinds of things that the carryover, that money would drop into fund balance. So it's appropriate to use one-time money for your carryover. And there's a significant amount of carryover that we're trying not to do in a supplemental budget. We tried to get it into the budget. So we were intentional about not using one-time money to fund our ongoing operations. And that's what that $2.7 million is. But if you also look back at that chart, next year, we still have a $5 million gap. And that's when our fund balance with that $5 million gap hits the line and starts to, in the following year, tank down. So, you know, as our city manager said, that fund balance is precious. It's too low right now, but that is the policy we have. One of the things that we're going to be working on is a risk-based reserve analysis that will tell us what our actual reserves should be based on the risks we face citywide. So it's still work to be done, but yes, it's a little under $2.8 million. So
Another comment from Nadia.
Not more a question, and Jenny, this might be for you, but I'll start with you, Chair. Just logistically, I know we've seen the agenda, but if someone could just help everyone understand like what the next thing's going to be, at what point we start voting, and if we can make sure we have clarification if and when we are voting things, because I know there seems like a lot coming.
The next item are the amendments. So we deal with both of those amendments to see if they go forward. And then once they're approved or not approved, then yikes. Then we actually approve the budget, basically. Kevin, you had a question and a slide just appeared here. Oh, here. Yeah, this is where the amendments go. Once we're done with discussion about the budget, then we will entertain the two amendments and then vote on those amendments and then vote on the entire budget. So, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, David. I also have amendments that I'm considering. I assume we'll go one by one, starting with the mayor because she already expressed an interest, and then do we keep going one by one with people who have amendments? Like, I feel like I might not be the only one.
Yes, we go one at a time.
Okay, thanks.
And John?
Yeah, I was just reiterating the same thing. I have at least one amendment too.
Okay, is there any general discussion before we go to the amendments? If not, I recognize that there are at least 2, 3, or 4 amendments to the proposed budget for 23-24. We'll take each proposed amendment one at a time. And if an amendment is moved and seconded, we will discuss the proposed amendment, then vote on it. Once the proposed amendment either carries or fails, we will then consider the next amendment in a similar way until all amendments have been fully considered. So Mayor Beatty, do you want to start with number 1?
Sure. And I'm sorry, my kid is screaming in the background. So let me pull up my notes here. Okay, first amendment for me tonight is to remove general funding from the First Street Dining Commons and transfer that funding to the Personnel Services category of emergency management to supplement funding for temporary help from July 1, 2023 to July 30, 2024, provided that the city manager report back to the city council by December 31, 2023 on a restructuring plan for emergency management. So I worked with the city manager today to move this money. Last night, the Bureau Board absorbed the entire cost of the First Street Dining Commons. So that's where this funding source is coming from. So we shifted money from the general fund into something that can be maintained by Bureau, another fund the body doesn't manage. There was also $23,000 in the emergency management budget for temporary help. So this will combined with that funding to give us about 6 months of additional help. As the mayor, I'm committed to hearing from CERT. I'll hold a town hall to hear from our CERT members directly on how they operate, what they do, the help that they need moving forward. The city manager is going to come back and present to city council a plan for how emergency management is going to operate. As your mayor, I stood up the largest public-private vaccine clinic in the state, and CERT made that possible. We stood up smoke shelters. When we had the firestorm years ago, CERT made that happen. They're at our community events. They're often in the background. They're doing great work for our city. They provide an alternative community policing response, things council has been asking for. I've been out to their training for ham radios. I've seen how dedicated they are. And I believe there's over 600 CERT volunteers. So making sure that in this transition that we're looking at a plan that they feel supported. I strongly urge the budget committee tonight to adopt this resolution so there is some continuity for our CERT volunteers while we're working through what a replan would look like. Council needs to weigh in on it. We still need to hear from the community. We need to hear from experts in emergency management to make sure that we're ready to go. So that's my first amendment for the evening.
Is there a motion to approve the amendment?
Motion. I'm happy to make the motion or someone else can. I make a motion to approve.
Okay, Amy has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Allison has seconded it. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, recorder, are we ready for a vote on the amendment package 1? Would you call the roll?
Yes, Councillor Duggar,
Yes.
Hartmeyer Prigg,
Yes.
Hassan,
Yeah.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tiffinon,
Yes.
Mayor Beatty,
Yes.
Member Hanway,
Yes.
Hong,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Satsumari,
Yes.
and I believe that's it. It looks like the motion carries.
Okay, the motion carries. Amendment number 2, Mayor Beatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My second amendment for this evening is going to be for PCC Future Connect. I'm suggesting that we reduce general fund funding from the Oregon Startup Center by $45,000 and reduce the Beaverton Startup Challenge by $20,000, so $65,000 in total, and transfer that money to Portland Community College Future Connect program. I recognize this isn't the full amount. This gives them about half of the funding that we had been doing. This program has grown from 50,000 to 100,000 to 150,000 since I've been the mayor. I am a first-generation college graduate, and I'm married to a first-generation college graduate. Both of us are proud community college graduates. We think this program is astronomically successful. My husband's completing his doctorate this year and was homeless in high school. And it wasn't for coaches that helped him along the way, he wouldn't be where he is today. He sat on the review committee for PCC Future Connect, helping select college recipients who had been in similar life situations that he had been. In a hard year like this, I looked over the budget to figure out where this funding could come from. And I think this is a fair compromise. We, as Councillor Hassan said, a lot of us view this as economic development, investing in young people. This gives us an opportunity to live our values. I talked to the Oregon Startup Center. This isn't a surprise amendment to them. They understand the position that we're in. We did some compromise on where the funding could come from. And so tonight I implore our budget committee members to support our young people in our community with this amendment for $65,000.
Second.
A motion to approve it.
Doesn't she technically make the motion and I'm seconding it, or am I wrong?
No, we need a motion once she suggests it, so.
I can make the motion.
Okay, Nadia makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Edward seconds it. Discussion.
Yeah, this is Allison. Having served as a liaison to the Oregon Startup Center, this is a sacrifice, and it's not the full amount that PCC Future Connect wants, and it's not the amount that we wish we could give. As we've heard tonight, there's cuts that feel like they're cutting into the bone, and they are. It's almost just a matter of spreading the cuts out in the fairest way we can think of. And I really appreciate the time and efforts that the mayor has put into thinking through both of these so that we can be responsive to what we're hearing from our residents. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but hopefully these are not forever cuts, just for now until we can figure out how to beef these back up, this type of community benefits. So thank you, Mayor.
I have a comment, and I'm kind of divided on this. Give you some background on myself. I'm a first generation low income student. This program is a great program, no doubt about it. But that's not the issue for me. The issue is we have a city government basically funding a state agency that is funded already to do this. They are funded to do mentorships, which they don't do a good job of. The graduation rate at PCC is 15%. And the feds, for example, got on for-profits because they were having similar graduation rates. And a lot of community colleges have horrible graduation rates. Why? Because most of the, well, I shouldn't say that. I guess I know too much about this, but and by the way, Lacey, I never did work for a community college. I was vice provost at the University of Washington for 30 years. But in a community college, you have the president and the major administrators making a lot of money from an educational perspective. And it's an inverted budget. The instructors generally are adjuncts who make, say, $2,000 a course, and they come and go because they can't live on it. And some of the student services also get lost in the crunch. So, for example, Portland State University has their own mentorship program, and their graduation rate is 60%, not 15%. And there are other types of financial aid. There's Pell Grants, which actually PCC gives out. So does Portland State, so do most universities. The community colleges themselves, PCC gives financial aid to students. And this is sort of a two-part program. One is a mentorship program, and the other is a funding piece of it. So I'm kind of divided. On one hand, I've never really heard of a city funding a state agency, a state educational agency before, because they're already funded to do that. They're just not doing a good job of it. So that's why I'm kind of divided. And obviously, spending my entire life in higher education, I'm kind of divided on the whole issue. I think higher education should be free, but it's not. And the community college, now I looked up the tuition is about $4,800, and the books are another, say, $1,500. So it's not super expensive, but it is a cost for somebody who's at a low income level. So those are my comments, I guess. Any other comments, discussion on this?
Yeah, I hear you, Chair. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I mean, I would just say that the way that I understand the program, and I did teach at Beaverton High School, is that it helps support students navigate college. And these are students who may not go to college or may not have the support that they need. And so while I do understand your perspective, I think that it's important that these are students that are going to Portland Community College. A good follow-up question, which I don't have the answer to, might be, what is the % graduation rate of Future Connect students of which we are investing in, that I would potentially be curious to ask. I actually think that if you look at the OTBC, why we fund OTBC, it is also related to economic development in our community. And so I just think we're actually reallocating those resources away from a nonprofit that's doing that work into a college that's ensuring that we have students that get to college. I would agree, though, like this should be a dependency model, and we should move to a model where cities aren't doing this, right? There should be some model that doesn't do that, but we do this today. Should we be potentially working toward weaning off it or looking at other avenues? 100%. But I do think this is an important piece. And I think we heard from many students and folks in the community about this, that at least I'm going to support it. So thanks.
I will tell you, Councillor Hassan, my team just texted me from the internet that it's a 35% success rate of Future Connect students graduate in 3 years or less. I will also say that this is a unique funding, and we have had this principled conversation on this council before about funding community college because of the reasons Mr. Chair has stated. I've actually, my very first time testifying in Salem as an elected official was on this topic to compel the state to fund more of this program so the city didn't have to. I went down with our chief administrative officer at the time and joined other people when now State Treasurer Tobias Reed was the chair of the committee hearing this testimony. I have a long history with this program, and I think it's a good investment for us, but is it a forever investment? That's something the council needs to have further conversation on, but in good faith, I didn't feel like we could pull the rug out from under them in a year when they're anticipating enrollment. We're at the end of the school year. It's critical times for them. So I think these are all great points to be raised, and I think we can have a future work session on this and address some of these points as well.
I think it may be useful to have a discussion with the president at PCC to say, how could you do some of this? Because I think her salary is probably higher than anybody on this call, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it, but at any rate. But maybe that conversation would wean the city off of something she should probably be doing. Now, she's a new president, so we have to give her a little slack here. Any other discussion? If there's no further discussion, Recorder, could you please call?
There was one more name in the chat right there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just popped up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Teresa.
Yes, I just wanted to chime into the discussion in regards to PCC and the contributions they give. I first would like to reiterate what has already been said, that it is a wonderful program, and I do not think that we should pull the rug under it when they are expecting the money. I will say last year in the time that I was, I'll say, finding myself, I did take classes at Portland Community College and applied for scholarships and grants, and did not take it, but was awarded one through PCC, which is the National Society of Leadership. And on their little solicitation placard that they offer the several students who are accepted for such an opportunity, they boast about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have to give students, and that oftentimes money is left on the table. And I still have my little solicitation placard at home from what it was given, and it states $400,000 in scholarships and awards offered to students for the opportunity that are exclusive to PCC, including job banks, and oftentimes half do not accept the funds, that you are partnered with professionals in your desired field if you have a declared major already. And this is just to speak on the point that there are financial opportunities at Portland Community College, but certainly they can expand on those. And I'm not familiar with the pay structure for each adjunct or professor or from the very people at the top, but to express that more can be done for our students, particularly our low-income students, for our students of color, I can say, you know, as a young person going into college myself, not that I am, you know, the most educated or the youngest person on the call, but perhaps someone who took a PCC class most recently in the room on this Zoom call right now, that there are so many opportunities for our young people. Absolutely more can and should be done. And I, for one, would like to see that conversation between City of Beaverton representatives and PCC moving forward. And over time, that PCC would be self-sustaining in truly providing for students who want an opportunity at higher education. And just wanted to chime that in, a little tidbit of information you maybe didn't know. Certainly $400,000 is not enough to help all the students, let alone the city of Beaverton, who want to attend PCC, but in Washington County and the greater Portland metropolitan area that are attending one of the several Portland community colleges here, if not in the state, since there are sister partnerships. Not to take up too much more time, Chair, I yield my time back to you.
Thank you, Teresa, and congratulations on that scholarship. Any other comments before we do the roll call? Okay, City Recorder, let's do the roll on this amendment.
Counselor Duggar,
Yes.
Hartmeyer Prigg,
Yes.
Hassan,
Yes.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Teeter,
Yes.
Tipnon,
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Beatty,
Yes.
and Member Hanway,
Yes.
Hong,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Zatzamari,
Yep.
and it looks like the motion carries.
Okay, the motion carries. Now, Kevin and John had potential amendments. Do you still have those amendments? Let's start with Kevin.
Yes, thank you. So one of the amendments is I propose providing management with a 3% raise instead of the 5% raise for this coming fiscal year. So the savings is around $721,000. And I would like to use that full amount to support Murray Shoals library operations and staff.
Point of order, the budget committee does not decide compensation for the city. That is for the city council to determine.
Say that one more time, please.
The budget committee's role is not to determine compensation for city employees. That is reserved for the city council, not for the budget committee.
Okay, so then I want it to go to support Murray Shoals library funds.
If I could just interject, Councilor Teeter, I think this is something actually you could bring up at the June 6th meeting, since that would be in the purview of the council at that time, but not within this body.
Point of order, isn't this body's whole reason to make a recommendation to the city council, which then determines whether to adopt the budget or not?
Not on compensation, unfortunately.
Point of order, though, we could change, regardless, we could change the line item of the budget to reflect whatever we want, though. Am I misunderstanding that? So
yes,
Teeter can change the budget to 900,000 for that particular line, which would in fact have the effect of what he's wanting to do.
There are multiple lines. There are multiple lines for staff. So you would have to identify for under budget law, the budget committee would have to identify all those various personnel lines and then move to amend each budget line by a certain dollar amount.
Can we get the city attorney to weigh in here?
Good evening. Bill Kirby, City Attorney. In many ways, this is definitely in the wheelhouse of the Finance Department and the budget law. But I think that what you're looking at is the motion by the city council to reduce the amounts would be something that could be worked on before that council meeting on June 6th. And the council would have the authority to vote on that and decide whether they wanted to make that decision at that time. Right now, what we have is I don't think you have enough information to make the appropriate motion in a way that's going to do what you want it to do. In principle, I think Member Duggar is correct that if we could identify each line item, you could theoretically make this motion, but as a practical matter, I don't think that can be done tonight.
Okay.
Point of order. Could would it be sufficient to reword, I suppose, the amendment to say that the proposed budget that presumably the committee is forwarding on with a recommendation to council also includes a recommendation from the committee to amend that proposed budget, reflecting each line item of labor that falls into the management category to reflect a 3% COLA as opposed to a 5% COLA. Some sort of wording that would get at the intention of Kevin's suggested amendment that could be an additional rider onto what we produce from this committee.
So I would say that all your council members are here and they've heard you, but that this is, like Susan said, budget law does not allow you to make that particular amendment in the way that it's made right now.
Well, point of order, that's not that's not what the city attorney just suggested. I mean, it was sort of like, if we had more time and could identify every single line, we could do it. I guess can the body recommend that finance identify those lines between now and the city council meeting to approve the budget for the city council to then take up with our recommendation regarding those?
Bill, what language could be used for this to happen?
Well,
Bill, do you really need an amendment to have the finance group to take a look at the different line items? That seems just like a request that would then go to the city council.
that's in the nature of what we're talking about, and I think that's what the finance director was suggesting. The only other thing, and this might speak to Member Decker's question, is completely separate from the process of the budget that's formally being processed right now. If we were done and there was a sense of the budget committee and a vote that is just simply advisory, it's after the public hearing is done. Is that something that the finance director has ever seen done? That's my question to the finance director. So this is more of a sense of the budget committee that is voted on, and you get a sense of where they would like the city council to move next.
Debbie, do you have a?
So like I
comment?
said, all the council members are in the room. So they've heard the request. We can certainly between now and June 6th have the information. So if that amendment wants to come forward on June 6th, we could be prepared. But the salary and compensation is the purview of the council and not the budget committee.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm interested in this information being included as part of June 6th conversations. My apologies for the misunderstandings. I've got a different amendment that I'd like to move on to.
So hold on.
Mayor, I see you. Yeah.
Yeah, let this be a lesson for future. This is why we begged people to bring amendments to the city manager in advance, because they are time consuming. They're hard to do on the fly. They're complicated, and we run into law problems. We heard Councilor Teeter's recommendation, but for it to move forward, I'm interested in the non-city councilors' opinions on this call, because I think he's going to bring this amendment to council. So I don't want to move away from it, even though we're not voting. I would like to hear from our city council budget committee members and where they are at on this. So we can't go back in time. When it goes to council, it's just the 7 of us.
Something from Kevin Hanway. Comment? You're muted.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Beatty, for asking for that input, because I was going to submit something to the council if we didn't talk about it tonight. If we were to take a vote on this tonight, I would vote no. What we're talking about is when you get into that level of compensation review is creating a mess for the city manager and finance director on that class and compensation study, where they're already aware, at least that they've reported to us that they're already aware of disparities between certain positions and competitiveness with other jurisdictions. And that what you'd be doing is punting to the following year to have to make some sort of catch up. If what the class and comp study determined was that the 3% study aggravated disparities that were there. And I do not think it would be a good decision to move forward on that basis.
Okay. Teresa?
Yes, thank you. I apologize for putting my name more than once in there. I put my name in there when Councillor Teeter started speaking to try and inquire on a point of clarification without having the outburst of point of clarification. To just, and it has been noted already, but my point of clarification regarding the amendment in regards to the 18 line items representing the 18 positions. And as Councillor Teeter alluded to, he stated the amount of $900,000. It's recorded, so it can be corrected if I'm incorrect in that statement, but more or less divided by the 18 to get more or less $50,000, but not every position is on the same pay scale. Just for a point of clarification, is that correct? So that on June 6th, the conversation after council has a conversation behind the scenes with the city manager is in regards to said 18 positions and their individual pay scales. Is that correct? And how that would fit into its own amendment that would go to council?
This isn't about the 18 positions. This is about all the remaining management positions in the city, citywide.
Thank you for that clarification.
Amy?
Thanks. I understand this. I think I understand the spirit of the amendment in an effort to try to right size the disparity in the budget. But it was also my understanding that we couldn't delve into those into the salaries and stuff for the city employees here. But my concern is that it would have probably unintended consequences and that we would be impacting a lot more people than what we realize. And I echo what was said earlier by Kevin, that we already were told, it seemed like repeatedly there's concern about how much work people have, staffing issues that are already existing without having a COLA to keep competitive. And I would just want to see, and I hope that you all do this, although I think it falls on the plate of the same finance team here. I would want a very detailed look at how many people that's going to impact. And then what would be the plan for next year? Because cost of living obviously changes each year. It's already, I think, below the federal COLA. But I think that I understand the reason for it, but I just think that you have to be very detailed in reviewing before you move out on something like that, and the number of people you would impact. And also consider the comment that was made, I think, by Jenny about concern about people that are already working for the city questioning staying. So those are my comments as a volunteer here. Thanks.
Rachel?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Similar to what members Hanway and Johnson have brought up, I would just add, I don't know, I've volunteered with the city through the NAC program and some other things, and I have always been very impressed with the level of professionalism that staff and management have had. And I would hate to see, while I do very much want to do what we can to prevent the library from closing for 3 days a week, I would hate to see attrition and people deciding to leave city of Beaverton. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Nadia?
Yeah, I just my one comment, because it sounds like we'll be talking this as a council. I would really like to make sure that we can see those tables to understand the pay rates of the different groups. I understand everyone's perspective. I do also believe that finding ways to keep the library would be really important to our community.
And Brian?
I would support the council strongly considering this amendment when the council takes up the budget. Just as a matter of principle, in a deficit year where you're looking at a $10 million structural deficit, where you are raising property taxes, where you're cutting services across citywide, across departments, the idea of giving management a raise above the inflation rate is something that should be looked on with skepticism. I understand that there's reasons to do it, and they're good, compelling reasons, but this is the year of tough choices and trade-offs. And if it's me, set aside that it's a deficit year, all of those umbrella considerations. On the other hand, we're also looking at laying off eight library staff members and cutting services to the library, where we've heard from 20 some odd members of the community that they don't want to see that happen. And given the choice between those two things, I'd side with the library.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I give my 2 cents since I won't be in the council. I'm a big super supporter of the library. I don't want to see it cut back. However, I think you'll find some unintended consequences to cut a raise for the management in terms of retention and so on. I supervised at the UW about 250 people. And I had one instance where one group was going, and these were both non-union groups. One group was going to get 3% and another group was going to get 2%. And I had an uprising with the 2% people, some of whom quit and so on and so forth because of the differential. And in the end, we made it so that everyone got sort of the same. So we didn't have that differential. But in terms of, given this job market, it's a tough job market to hire people in, and I'd hate to see people leave for a couple percent in terms of their wages. That said, possibly there's another way to deal with the library issue. Don't know. Teresa.
Yes, I just want to echo some of what David had said. But I also would like to add that having volunteered for many years within the city of Beaverton in various parts and in Washington County, that our staff are quite tenured and many of them live in Beaverton. So to live and work in a city is a special thing, a very special thing, and work culture plays a part in that. And those who have seen the work culture change to whatever varying degree with the change in the form of government, with their mentor retiring, people that they have been working with for years, transitioning out of the city of Beaverton to work in Portland or Multnomah County or Washington County or county further away, that those things all being considered, that no matter how much you like your coworker, you also like to get paid what you feel is fair. And so I know I do. So from a practical standpoint, but also from a volunteer standpoint, to once again ensure that those city staffers that community members have come to know and love, and may even have relied on, befriended, it's about the city services provided, that the employees are able to do their job, but that they also, as community members, feel a part of that community, and the library as a service, but also their team. They work with their team and see them more than any city councilor, more than surely any of us on this Zoom call. For the many people that will watch and listen to this afterwards, that are seeing the decisions being made this evening, the last thing we want is for various department managers or people who have the most responsibility to leave, right? Or to in any way have animosity toward a coworker, making things difficult, or what have you. We all are professionals. We work in the workplace and understand it's more than just money, but money certainly is important. And I just wanted to, from that very practical standpoint, chime in my 2 cents. And so for any and all staffers listening to this right now or later, please don't leave. If you need extra 20, for gas, community members are willing to help you. I don't know how legal that is. I see the city attorney looking at me weird, but listen, one community, one Beaverton. City staffers, we appreciate you, whether or not you heard it today. We appreciate you. We love you. If you need a cup of coffee, pretty sure because I ran for Beaverton City Council, my phone number's on the internet now. Give me a call. Don't leave. Don't leave. That's all I'm going to say. If you've worked in your job and you know your job well and people come to you for advice, please don't leave. I know things are rough right now. We're working it out. We're just going to put that out there. So it is on record. We need the best of the best. We have one of the most diverse cities in the city of Beaverton, and that comes with work in ensuring that our city staff can provide a service for our community members. And that's what we're part of, being a part of the change we want to see and contributing, even when it means making tough decisions. So once again, staff at whatever level you are, thank you. We're proud of you. We appreciate you. And stick around for another 2 fiscal years. Chair, I yield my time back to you.
Thank you, Teresa. Well, it sounds like we can't really move on this amendment, but Kevin had a second amendment. So would you go forward?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Let's try this again. I would like to propose eliminating the purchase of 3 police vehicles this fiscal year, and with the intention of transitioning more patrol officers to being on bicycles for the bicycle outreach teams. Given that we are updating our camping ordinances and opening up a new shelter, I'm trying to look ahead for what our houseless outreach needs will be in the near and in the upcoming future. And our bike team does a good job with that. I think they're going to need some more resources. And I think if we're able to not purchase these 3 vehicles and instead shift more to the e-bikes that are also in the budget, that can support some of the central Beaverton patrolling and houseless outreach in the area. That reduction in funds for 3 vehicles is $163,500. And I would like to propose using $60,000 of that to fully restore the PCC Future Connect funding and use the remaining $103,500 to supplement the Murray Shoals Library funding.
Is there a motion to approve this amendment?
I can make it, sure.
Nadia moves to approve, second.
I'll second it, just for discussion.
Okay, John seconds it, and we have the chief here, I think. Chief, do you want to address this? You have any comments?
Hi. I'd love to. What you're proposing is that I would take officers from our patrol division and dedicate them to the bike team, which right now our staffing in our patrol division is at a minimum level of staffing. So I don't have the resources to move assets as you're suggesting to our bike team, or to increase or inflate that current proactive team, because that would deplete our ability to respond to 911 calls and have the number of officers within our staffing within patrol to be sustainable. And in addition to that, Counselor, the cars that we are requesting are part of a replacement cycle. And our original replacement request was 7 patrol vehicles to be in line with where we need to be annually. And we removed 4 cars from that replacement request. And those 3 are, we've already kind of kicked the can down the road, if you will, with those additional 4, which will have longer term impacts on our sustainability with our fleet. Those cars are driven 20 to 24 hours a day.
Thank you, Chief. Ashley, comment?
Chief actually answered the questions I had, so no further from me.
Nadia.
I just want to get some clarification. Councilor Teeter, it sounded like you said taking some of the funds from the police vehicles and using them to go toward the bike out, because I took notes. So it's 163.5. Can you just repeat, like, just logistically what you're saying so I can understand it?
So yeah, if the replacement for 3 vehicles is 163,500, 60,000 of that would go to PCC Future Connect, and the remaining 103,500 would go to library funding.
Okay. And then the comment about the bike outreach, is that related to this amendment, or it's
It's more that I recognize that we are reducing the amount of police vehicles we have, and in an effort to maintain the same amount of patrol officers, and given the fact that e-bikes increase some of the range, like having them patrol Central Beaverton more directly and support houseless outreach felt like it could be an option.
okay. I know that I made the motion, but sometimes we make motions and second motions so that we can have discussions. But I actually support this. So I do believe there's a need for us to think about, if I said it earlier, alternatives to, response in our community. I actually think our bike outreach team is one of our best teams on the ground doing some of the work that needs to be done with our houseless folks. I would love to move to a spot where maybe we don't have police response with our houseless community. I understand that's where we are today, but I'd really like to see that shift in the future. And of course, I am gravely concerned about the library, since we haven't really, addressed that one issue. And I know that it means taking from somewhere else, but it is weighing really heavily on my mind at 12:20 a.m. Eastern. Thanks.
Teresa.
Yes, thank you. I had just a quick point of clarification myself for Counselor Teeter. And so a point of clarification and then a question after that. Based on what the chief had stated regarding not being able to, the vehicles are part of something that has been kicked down the road, and the funding is for that. And then you did clarify based on the question on the fund breakdown exactly for transitioning the funds for patrol vehicles to bicycles, with the amendment to also have the police officers specifically patrol Central Beaverton. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's why I'm asking for a point of clarification, that the police officers who were patrolling Beaverton, we don't know what their patrol route was at this time. The chief may or may not need to dig into that, to dive deeper into that. But in my mind, that the police officers who were patrolling the streets of Beaverton in their vehicle would now need to patrol that same area regardless of what that route looked like on a bicycle. And like I said, I just wanted that clarification because that to me, I wouldn't want to bike all of Beaverton on a bicycle to patrol. I know you're very fit and you bicycle. So I just wanted that point of clarification to say, I know you said Central Beaverton, but we cannot dictate, to my knowledge and understanding, how the police chief assigns her officers to patrol what specific areas because they're currently already assigned. And so to take the funds from the vehicles and have them use bicycles once again, I just wanted that clarification because in my mind, it sounds like the police officers wouldn't get the vehicles and they would be required to patrol the same areas, but on bicycles. So point of clarification, please correct me with that. And then I just had a question, but I will hold my question until I get a point of clarification. And I apologize if I sound ridiculous. I truly don't mean to be, but that's what I heard from what you were saying in reference to not having patrol vehicles and then having bicycles.
Let me try to address that point of clarification from a legal standpoint. And if finance folks want to chime in afterwards, that's fine too. But the motion is really a motion to remove $163,500 from, I'm going to say it as materials and services, the vehicles of the police department, and to transfer that over to PCC Future to Connect in the library funding. What operational impact that has is not this committee's role to play with. It would be the police chief having to decide, what do I do now that I don't have 3 vehicles? And it would be for, I'll say the library director, now that I have $103,500, what am I going to do with that? It's not this committee's role to say, and this is what you'll do with that particular money. But you are providing direction and opportunities to take money from one pot and put it in, and it balances. But to go into further detail, I think what the police chief was doing was saying, this would be the practical impact as best I understand it to what you're suggesting, but that is not necessarily a direction that this committee would give. I hope that clarifies things. And if the finance director or assistant finance director, city manager wants to add further clarification, I understand.
Mayor Beatty.
Thank you for that. I'm glad you answered that question because that was going to be my first one. It is a policy decision that would remain with the council as a directive to the city manager if we were going to change course on how we patrol and police in the city. And I don't have enough information to be able to support moving patrol officers to do that sort of work. I also know that vehicles are life and safety issues for officers that drive them, given the fact they're driven 20 to 24 hours a day. I know in the earlier round cuts, there were 7 vehicles, so they're already making quite a concession to have 3 replaced. I don't feel comfortable not replacing vehicles that are suggested by our expertise to have our staff drive in them. The error that could happen to an officer's life in a vehicle that is not up to standard is alarming to me. This is also one-time use money trying to fix a structural problem in the library. So we kick the can on the police vehicles. We have to buy them in a couple years, and we're still $168,000 short next year for the library as well. So I don't think taking one-time use money to fix a structural problem is the right move for us tonight. And I'd have to know a lot more from the police chief about the life of the vehicles and the unintended outcome of not replacing them. And I don't think we could simply say, one is a contract issue, simply saying you're not going to be in a car anymore, you're going to be on a bike. I would want to know a lot more about what that impact would have on our community.
Edward.
Thank you. I think Mayor Beatty just shared what my thoughts were. So I'm second to her concerns. In regards to, but then I do understand what Councilor Teeter is going for, going more bike officers and more safety. And I do have the same concern with the library decreasing its days. But I would need more information and then next plan to make decisions on that. And I think we could discuss that in the council when we make policies. But I do want to ask maybe Jenny, city manager, to because everybody seems like have a question in regards to the library. But my understanding is that because of the cuts of the funding from the Washington County, that we had to come up with a way to save the Murray Shoals Library. Our goal wasn't to decrease days and cut the staff, but we were trying best to save as much as possible. And maybe we can reiterate that to the community and our members, the process, if possible, you could share it with us tonight. And there's a continued issue with continued funding, and that's what we deal with. And maybe I'm the only one who doesn't understand, but maybe you can elaborate on that. That the decrease of days of the library was to actually save and keep the library open. Yeah, that's my comment and question.
So you have two separate funds that have troubles, right? General fund and library fund. Both are funded separately, both are funded differently. The city does provide funding through property tax to the library fund, and it supplants what the delta is because there's a gap in what we receive from the county and the levy. It's inadequate. It has been inadequate for some time. I appreciate everyone's creative thinking on how we can restore services, but you're robbing Peter to pay Paul to the detriment of the general fund, because eventually those things that you're suggesting have to be sustainable, they have to be permanent, they have to be long-term. Otherwise, we're going to be right back at this with kicking the can, and it gets exacerbated, right? And it compounds year after year. And you also need to make sure that we're not doing anything to the detriment of essential services that are provided on the general fund side, because then we're going to end up being in a situation where we have to use things like reserves and one time more than we want to. So it's very challenging. I understand what this committee is trying to do, but we have a significant problem with both funds, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. Our goal is to try to create a glide path on the library fund as best that we can. And that is even still tenable with respect to the level of reserves that we have projected for the library fund, because we want to do that while we're strategizing on working with the community as we prepare for the levy that's going to come into renewal in 25-26. And so those are just my 2 cents. There is no easy answers here. I appreciate the concepts. And I understand where folks are trying to go with respect to suggestions around moving patrol officers around and whatnot. There are so many operational impacts to those recommendations. And not only that, there are labor implications, there are legal exposure issues with doing that. And so those would have to be concepts that have to be fully vetted and are beyond this conversation this evening.
And if I make one comment, thank you for that, city manager. If I know I spoke with the mayor previously about maybe working with the Washington County, other city mayors and libraries to maybe better stream the funding in the future, so we can sustain this effort to keep the library open to the public. And maybe mayor can chime in on that if she can. That we will be working hard to keep the library open for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Kimmy. You know, I'm committed to meeting with the mayors of Hillsborough and Tigard. The city manager and I have discussed that, particularly given the GIS mapping of where when you have a library card, you have an address and has a zip code connected to it. So we pulled that data. We know a large amount of people accessing our libraries are from unincorporated. And in years past, when we had a strong budget, offsetting out of our general fund, it was completely reasonable where we're at now is a challenging position. We're not the only city in this position. We are one of almost all of the cities in this position. What's incredibly challenging is the state is expecting the largest kicker in the state's history. And we are here having to close library services, talk about laying off staff, and being in the worst situation we've been in over a decade since the recession. So this is not an easy task on all of us, but as the mayor, I'm committed to having those conversations. We collectively, elected body, have to work to get the WCCS or WCCLS library levy passed. That takes all the elected officials in the county to do it. I'm going to work as hard as I can to renegotiate or talk about what it would take to renegotiate a higher distribution out of that system. We operated this branch library without supporting for years, trying to get it into the base funding for this. So this is nothing new for the city. We have done this before. We have negotiated a higher rate before. I'm here to do it. Can we solve it tonight? No, because the levy is not up for renewal yet. But I think the mayor of Hillsborough and Tigard are facing similar problems. How do they serve the fastest growing part of their cities? And this is a good opportunity for us in our year to talk about partnership and what that means.
Okay, one other comment from Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I urge the voting members of the committee to support this amendment, and here's why. I think the city attorney's framing of it is well taken. It is not so much directing the police chief how to staff various divisions within patrol or within the department as a whole, but simply to take this line item of what's targeted as funding for vehicles in this budget, which is $647,155, and reducing that by 25%. And on top of that, in this proposed budget, is something on the order of $18,000 for the purchase of 3 new electric bicycles. I see this as less a one-time funding issue and more a going forward sort of right sizing of the police fleet, not in terms of numbers of vehicles, but in terms of alternative types of vehicles. That $647,000 is earmarked, is designated as for the purchase of 12 police vehicles, so averaging $53,000 each. Most of the police vehicles, if not all of the police vehicles for the Beaverton Police Department, are Interceptor SUVs. I'm old enough to remember when the standard police car was a Crown Vic or a Chevy Caprice. They've gotten big and expensive, and more expensive in terms of ongoing operating costs. There are lower cost alternatives. Yes, e-bikes should be considered alternatives to vehicles for certain types of, to motor vehicles for certain types of patrols, not as like just an additional new expenditure on top of the existing vehicle budget. They should be considered a lower cost alternative. But even in between that, readily available police vehicles on the market don't include Crown Vics and Chevy Caprices anymore. They do include things like a Dodge Charger sedan, which is on the order of $10,000 less expensive per each than the SUVs that BPD is purchasing. That is also pursuit rated for freeways. So would work on 217 and 26 just like the SUVs. And then for lighter duty, for your detectives, for your supervisors, there are street level pursuit rated electric vehicles, Chevy Bolts, that are another $10,000 less expensive. So I'd like to see going forward the funding for the police vehicle fleet be reflective of a right sizing in terms of those less expensive per each alternative vehicles. And I think that this amendment is a good start to nudge that process forward and phasing out having too many of the more expensive vehicles on the market.
Okay,
Can I speak to that, sir?
sure, of course.
Our hybrid, our Ford Explorers, as you put them, Mr. Decker, are all hybrid vehicles and save the city about 15,000 gallons of fuel annually. And then we do have a fair amount of electric plug-in vehicles that compromise or consist in our detective division. So we are trying to transition our vehicles into a more eco-friendly model, which is part of our council objectives. So I just wanted to frame that up.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair, can I respond?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And I do acknowledge, it's been a huge step forward, I think, over the last few years in the fuel efficiency of the hybrid interceptors as opposed to the ones that existed before. I think they get about 24 miles to the gallon. The sedans still beat them in fuel efficiency, even though they're not hybrid, and so would save the city more money in operating costs. And then, of course, replacing more of them with the not pursuit rated or lighter pursuit rated, surface level pursuit rated vehicles, like a Chevy Bolt would drastically reduce or increase fuel efficiency, even over the strides that have been taken so far.
So, as our city attorney said before, we're not here to provide operational direction to the chief. The amendment that is for consideration is taking $163,500 out of capital outlay in the police department and transferring $103,500 to the library and $60,000 to PCC Connect. So $103,500 at the library, I don't think gets you much. But I would let our library director talk to that, because I don't think it's going to get you a full day open.
Yeah,
If you
thank you. As previously mentioned, thank you for the warm handoff there, Debbie. That the finance director is correct. As previously mentioned, that amount of money unfortunately is insufficient to even get us back another day of service. So would I love to have an additional $103,000 to play with in the library and to provide additional services on behalf of the community? Absolutely. Could I use that funding to add an additional day of service back to the library branch? Unfortunately, no.
Okay. If there are no other comments on this amendment, I think it's time to take a vote. So City Recorder, would you please take a vote by roll?
Counselor Duggar,
No.
Hartmeyer Prigg,
No.
Hassan,
Yes.
Kimmy,
No.
Teeter,
Yes.
Tivnon,
No.
Mayor Beatty,
No.
Member Hanway,
No.
Ong,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Payne,
No.
Zatzmary.
No.
Motion failed
Okay.
2-10.
Okay, the motion fails. Now, John, did you have an amendment as well? Or do you have any others, Kevin? Let's start there.
No, thank you. I took
Okay.
enough time. That was good. Thank you.
Counselor Duggar, do you have any?
I think not for tonight. I think I will have one just for Ginny's edification and others for June 6th meeting. I am really uncomfortable with that associate transportation engineer for this year. I'm receptive, so I'm probably going to submit an amendment. I don't want to surprise you all, but I also recognize that I'm also on the East Coast, as Councilor Husson is. So it's almost 1 in the morning for me. So I want to make sure I'm thinking about this the proper way. So I don't have an amendment for tonight, but I will likely bring it to the council just so you're all thinking about that. But none for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Now, we're ready for a vote on the main motion as amended by the amendment number 1 and 2. So this is the main budget, fiscal year 23-24 as amended by amendments number 1 and 2 that passed successfully. So City Recorder, would you please call the vote by roll?
Counselor Duggar,
I think, can we, there's other people in the comment box. Do we need to go to them first?
I don't think
Councilor
there's,
Hudson and the mayor had questions.
yeah, I guess we can, but I don't think there's. I don't
It
know
was
about the
before your
comment.
motion. So that's why I just want to make sure. before
Okay,
we-
Nadia,
I mean, I'm feeling really conflicted on this budget, so I just wanted to go on record to say that. I know that I have another crack at it because the city council gets to review it in a couple weeks again. I'm just struggling, and I want to make sure I kind of say that for the record. There were some discussions here that I feel staff were saying are operational that I do believe are policy focused and policy things that at the council should be weighing on, maybe not the entire budget committee, but I'm just really conflicted right now about where this budget is today. And I want to be super honest with you all about that. Thanks.
okay, thanks Nadia, and Lacey said that she's okay. So I think it's time for the roll then on the budgets with the 2 amendments that we passed. City Recorder,
Counselor Duggar,
Yes.
Hartmeyer Prigg,
Yes.
Hassan, Counselor Hassan,
I'm thinking, I'm sorry, can you give me a minute? Yes.
Kimmy,
Yes.
Teeter,
Yes.
Tivnon,
Yes.
Mayor Beatty,
Yes.
Member Hanway,
Yes.
Pong,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Satsmary,
yes.
and motion carries.
Okay, the proposed Beaverton budget for fiscal year 23-24 is approved by the committee with the amendments will be forwarded to the city council for a public hearing on June 6th. With that, we've completed the agenda and the meeting is adjourned.
Did we, you also have to have the motion to approve the tax and.
Oh, okay, that wasn't in the comments, but
That was part of Ashley's main motion.
That's correct. And I think that for the clarity of the record, let's go ahead and touch the ad valorem tax and the $2,315,000.
okay, the proposed budget for fiscal year 23-24 is submitted. And to set the ad valorem tax rate for operations at 4.6180 per thousand of assessed valuation, and to set the property tax levy for the general obligation debt of $2,315,000 as amended. Bill, do we need to take the roll again?
I'm going to assume that if you said all in favor, say aye, and then asked all in favor or all opposed, say nay, no one's going to say nay. So let's do that by voice. And if anyone says nay, we're going to have to take a roll call vote.
Okay, who approves that budget?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? So we will forward this to the city council for a public hearing on June 6th. And now we've completed tonight's agenda and we can adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.